Aki Tomoya was cycling to deliver his last newspaper of the day when suddenly he saw a white beret flying in the wind. He quickly pedaled to chase after it, and when he finally caught it, he looked back to see who owned it. There stood a beautiful young woman gazing at him. And with that, his fate in this spring season began. The alarm in Tomoya's room rang, prompting him to get up and prepare to head out, but not before he greeted the anime poster on his wall. He set off to deliver newspapers early in the morning, greeting his neighbor who subscribed to the paper. His neighbor asked if Tomoya was now a paperboy and what had happened to his previous job. Tomoya replied that he was still working at the rental store and the restaurant, he just wanted to add a morning job as well. The neighbor praised Tomoya for being so diligent and asked if it was difficult for him to balance work with school. Tomoya admitted he could manage it, especially since he had a big goal he was working toward. Wasting time wasn't an option, so he bid farewell and went on his way. His neighbor wondered what anime Tomoya was currently obsessed with. This morning marked the first day of the new school year at Toyobasaki Private Academy. Sawamura Spencer Ariri was looking at the announcement board of the class lists. All her friends greeted her. This year, Ariri was in Class 2G with Kyo Isumaki and Azusa Satomi, and she was glad to be in the same class as them. Suddenly, she noticed a girl arriving, staring at her even as she passed through the school gate. Tomoya was in Class 2B this year, and he was once again in the same class as Kamibu Yoshihiko. Yoshihiko greeted him, but Tomoya asked him not to bother him because he was busy. Yoshihiko guessed that Tomoya must be compiling info on winter anime or reviewing the light novel released last March. However, it turned out Tomoya had already completed that. He had summarized the anime within 24 hours of the final episode airing, reviewed the novel 3 days after its release, and had even completed the game review. Tomoya's mission was to provide helpful news without spoilers, allowing his readers to enjoy it fully. Yoshihiko called Tomoya a unique kind of blogger and asked what he was working on now. Tomoya explained that he had an important mission, a masterpiece project that would be the beginning of an otaku's life. Just then, Yoshihiko froze, staring out the classroom window and urged Tomoya to look too. Tomoya was annoyed by Yoshihiko's sudden distraction just after he'd answered his question. But Yoshihiko was watching Ariri. She was a half-Japanese, wealthy girl whose father was a British diplomat. What's more, she was the star of the art club, and her artwork had even been accepted for the city art exhibition right after she enrolled here. Tomoya asked why Yoshihiko was so interested in her, and Yoshihiko said Ariri looked even more charming this year. Tomoya asked if Yoshihiko still liked three-dimensional girls, especially when Tomoya himself had already committed to two-dimensional girls. But Yoshihiko pointed out that Ariri was every bit a moe heroine with her pale skin, blonde twin tails, and knee socks, the ideal dream girl from any two-dimensional game. Tomoya replied that three-dimensional girls were just too much trouble. Yoshihiko suggested they go to the opening ceremony together, but Tomoya told him to go ahead. He'd catch up later. Ariri went to her locker and opened it to get her comic, only to hear Tomoya call her careless, saying she usually did miss limited editions. Tomoya informed her that online stores had long since stopped taking orders and that he had pre-ordered from every store that offered exclusive products. Ariri reminded Tomoya not to talk to her at school. Tomoya responded by asking if that was any way to treat the guy who had carried 5 boxes, each weighing 1.8 kilograms, around Akihabara on release day for her. Ariri replied that she'd already given him a bonus poster and said it should be Tomoya thanking her. Then she asked why he was in Class G when he was actually a Class B student. Tomoya was surprised she knew his class placement, considering it had just been announced today. Embarrassed, Ariri said she'd leave if Tomoya didn't have any other business with her. Tomoya called out to her, saying he wanted to talk about something important. However, the opening ceremony was about to start, so Ariri reminded him of that. Tomoya insisted it would be better to say it now, practically begging her to listen. He started telling her about his project plan. Curious, Ariri asked why someone like Tomoya would have such a ridiculous and painful idea. Tomoya was thrilled. She asked and explained that a week ago, he'd experienced a life-changing moment. He described feeling something in his hands that he could only call destiny or maybe even a miracle. He said it felt like a scene from a shoujo manga, a romantic anime, a moe light novel, or the prologue of a dating sim. However, Ariri replied that she had seen that kind of thing a million times and was already tired of it. Tomoya explained that this formula for success worked well and was popular, so he wanted to pour his feelings into it. Ariri asked if Tomoya wanted to make a game that told the story of his encounter with this girl. Tomoya said that when he saw the girl, he could already envision the text and music, almost like it was playing in his head. That was when he realized the only way to tell the story was through a game. Ariri questioned why Tomoya hadn't just chased after the girl and confessed his love. Tomoya countered by asking why he bothered confessing to a three-dimensional girl. Frustrated, Ariri asked if he really wanted to drag her into his little fantasy world. Tomoya pointed out that Ariri was the best illustrator he knew. By day, she was the pride of Toyogasaki Academy's art club, but by night, her secret otaku identity was as the popular 18-plus doujinshi artist known as Egoistic Lily or Kashiwaji Eri. Annoyed, Ariri reminded Tomoya not to use that name at school. Tomoya asked if she considered working on the project, but Ariri declined. Then Tomoya reminded her of the promise they made in grade school. Back then, Tomoya had told her that one day he would be the director of a game company, and when that day came, he would hire her. Ariri had said she would wait for him no matter how long it took and become an artist for his game company. With a toss of her hair, Ariri brushed it off, saying no grade school kid makes a future promise with that much detail. Ariri told Tomoya that if he was really serious about his project, he should be creating the illustrations and script himself, since that's what true doujin artists do. Tomoya said there's no way he could do that, as he'd never be able to capture the girl's beauty, not in a million years. Intrigued, Ariri asked just how beautiful this girl really was, but Tomoya replied that the scene was still etched into his memory. He described her in a white dress and beret, standing on a hill, surrounded by cherry blossom petals blowing in the wind. Ariri pointed out that Tomoya's words didn't give any details about her face. She was sure he couldn't even remember what the girl looked like. Tomoya replied that his feelings weren't about capturing some perfect image. He said he didn't want to lessen her beauty with his attempts. He needed Ariri's illustration skills for that. Frustrated, Ariri tore up Tomoya's project proposal, saying that his thinking was shallow. Tomoya was stunned that a doujinshi artist would say something like that. Ariri argued that if this was supposed to be his grand project and he'd forgotten such a key element, then it was obvious he wasn't serious about it. She called him a fake producer, just looking to take advantage and enjoy the results without real dedication. Tomoya insisted he wasn't half-hearted, he was passionate, filled with ideas, and driven to bring this project to life. Ariri, unimpressed, questioned whether all his ideas fit on a single piece of paper. She suggested it was probably just a simple plot about a boy meeting a mysterious girl, getting close to her, kissing, and then ending it. She scoffed that his so-called unique vision could be summed up in a single sentence. Ariri walked away, ignoring Tomoya's pleas to hear him out. He told her he'd be waiting in the AV lab after school, but Ariri replied it was far too late for him to convince her now. During the opening ceremony, Yoshihiko noticed how dejected Tomoya looked and asked if he'd been rejected by a girl on the first day of school. Tomoya denied it, saying he was just dealing with a major crisis between him and his fresh start as an otaku. But, as usual, Yoshihiko wasn't really listening. Instead, he pointed out a girl named Kasumigoka Utaha. She was the smartest student in the school, ranking number 1 in her class for 2 years straight. Rumor had it that she lived in her own world, always slept in class, and never did her homework. Yet no teacher dared to scold her. Tomoya called Yoshihiko out for acting like he knew Utaha when he'd never actually met her. Utaha was indeed gorgeous and widely considered one of the 2 most beautiful girls at Toyogasaki Academy. Some people even said she was the dark side to Ariri's light side. Tomoya warned Yoshihiko that comparing Ariri and Utaha like that could come back to bite him. Still, Yoshihiko pressed on, saying Utaha had long black hair, a great figure, and wore black stockings. She was practically the perfect moe heroine to rival Ariri. But Tomoya insisted Yoshihiko stop judging them purely based on their appearances. Yoshihiko conceded it was odd that neither girl was ever seen hanging out with guys despite all the admiration they got. He figured they either knew how to hide it well, or maybe they actually dislike men. Tomoya told Yoshihiko not to ask him about it, but Yoshihiko laughed it off, saying he should have known better than to discuss it with Tomoya, the guy who only liked two-dimensional girls. After school, Tomoya met with Utaha, bringing her lunch since he knew she probably hadn't eaten yet. He asked if he could sit beside her, but Utaha just stayed silent and nudged him with her foot as a sign to open her lunchbox. She started eating with enthusiasm and then began asking questions, though her voice was barely audible. Tomoya handed her a drink. When she finished eating, Utaha said it must be because he wanted a favor that Tomoya was willing to show up in front of the woman he long discarded. Tomoya asked her not to say things that could give people the wrong idea and asked for her thoughts on his project plan. He admitted he'd never written a script before and would really appreciate her feedback. He then asked for an even bigger favor, saying he'd be thrilled if Utaha would join the whole project. Utaha's reaction, however, took him by surprise. She immediately crumpled the project proposal paper, saying, "Trash is trash, filth is filth, and ashes remain ashes." Tomoya was shocked, especially since he'd written the proposal with all his heart. Utaha told him that his misguided passion, his blatant naivety, and even his perseverance didn't match up to the appeal of his own name. She wasn't willing to give feedback on something she found unworthy. Tomoya asked if his project was really that terrible. Utaha gave a score of 0, saying parts of it were muddled, predictable from the story and source material alone. The worst part, she added, was that the content wasn't even on par with a pirated copy. She told him that what she'd read so far had left her completely disappointed. Tomoya couldn't believe Utaha thought so poorly of his project. She also said she was too busy to indulge in Tomoya's fleeting desire to start a game production studio. Tomoya insisted it wasn't just a whim. He'd always wanted to make games. He wanted to match, even in some small way, the game creators he admired. He reminded her that Utaha had once suggested that he might or might not have what it took to be a game creator. Utaha didn't remember ever saying that and accused him of trying to change the subject with some underhanded flattery. Tomoya was frustrated with her, especially knowing Utaha was the top student at Toyabasaki Academy and actually the famous high school novelist Kasumi Utako, the author of Koizuru Metronome, which had sold over 500,000 copies. Utaha said that since Tomoya knew who she really was, he should know she was very busy. Tomoya mentioned he knew she recently started a new series and congratulated her on it. She thanked him and started to walk away. Tomoya kept pleading, asking Utaha to meet him in the AV lab after school. Utaha, however, couldn't help but regret that he was only asking for her help now. Tomoya continued working on his project proposal, then headed out to meet Ariuri and Utaha. Suddenly, Kato Megumi called out to him, saying that Ms. Asumi asked him to come to the teacher's room to help carry teaching materials to the AV lab. However, Tomoya replied that he couldn't go right now because he had something important to do and that he would take care of it early tomorrow. Megumi then thanked him for retrieving her white Barrett that had fallen during spring break. Tomoya didn't remember this immediately, since it had been a few days, but then he realized who she was. Meanwhile, Ariuri was waiting in the AV lab. Hearing a noise inside the room, she said that she came not because she agreed with Tomoya's request, but simply because she'd lose sleep if she didn't settle things. Utaha responded by praising her sense of duty, surprising Ariuri, who didn't realize Utaha was there. Shocked, Ariuri yelled, ran up to her, and asked why she was here. Utaha shot back with the same question, asking why Ariuri was there. Ariuri guessed that Tomoya must have asked Utaha to come as well. Utaha admitted that she felt something was off when Tomoya mentioned wanting to make a game, but she hadn't expected him to ask Ariuri to do the character designs. Not wanting to be outdone, Ariuri shot back that Tomoya had asked a gloomy girl like Utaha to write the script. Utaha smirked, sarcastically wondering if it was wise to trust the illustrations to a delinquent who acted like a perfect young lady on the outside but was rotten on the inside. This infuriated Ariuri, who insisted she wasn't a delinquent, while Utaha admitted she might be gloomy, but at least she was more honest with herself than Ariuri. Ariuri warned Utaha to stay away from Tomoya, accusing her of just latching onto him because he reached out. Utaha countered, saying Ariuri had no right to talk since she was doing the same thing. Angered, Ariuri stated that she'd actually come to stop Tomoya because she didn't believe his crazy project would succeed. Utaha casually remarked that if Ariuri felt that way, maybe she shouldn't have come in the first place. Deciding to leave, Ariuri asked if Utaha was planning to stay and entertain Tomoya's wild fantasies. Tomoya interrupted, saying it wasn't Ariuri's concern. Realizing Megumi was the girl he met in the spring, Tomoya went back to her to confirm. Megumi clarified that they were in the same class. Tomoya, still confused, asked if her name was Kanu Megumi, but she corrected him, saying her full name was Kato Megumi. One day in the spring, Tomoya met his destiny. He had long remembered his dream, which was to create a dating sim game that could make people laugh, feel touched, and create a main heroine who could make people's hearts ache. At first, the response from those close to him was cold, but he didn't give up on expressing his dream, and eventually his friends came back to him one by one. He also had a dramatic encounter with that girl, and he started taking the first steps toward realizing his big dream. Ariuri slapped him to snap Tomoya out of his self-deception in the middle of a recap of episode 1. Utaha just watched their debate while working on the project. Tomoya invited Megumi to meet him at a cafe. He told her that he hadn't realized how sweet she was before. Megumi thanked him and said that what Tomoya hadn't realized wasn't her sweetness, but that he had actually never noticed her presence. It turned out that Megumi had been in the same class with him since the first year of high school. She had always been the girl who was close by. The waiter came over to their table and Megumi began to order food. Tomoya observed how sweet Megumi was with a classic charm. She wasn't too tall or too short, her skin was smooth, and her figure was slender with curves in all the right places. It was clear she was a sweet girl, and Tomoya felt a sense of fate connecting him to her. Megumi thanked Tomoya for treating her, but Tomoya apologized for suddenly inviting her to meet. It was a coincidence that Megumi had no plans that day, so she was able to accept his invitation. Tomoya asked about her hat, and Megumi explained that she had given it to her cousin since he had stopped by and liked it, so she gave it to him as a gift. Tomoya realized that this meeting wasn't just about family obligations. Megumi then asked why Tomoya had asked her that, and Tomoya just thought it was a coincidence. However, Megumi said that if Tomoya noticed her, just like how he noticed him, then it wasn't a coincidence. Tomoya complimented Megumi's good memory, saying she could remember such an insignificant otaku. Megumi told him that even though Tomoya was an otaku, he shouldn't consider himself unimportant. Tomoya believed he had no appeal at all. Megumi then pointed out that Tomoya was one of the 3 popular kids at school. He was known for donating light novels to the library, organizing anime screenings during the school festival, and no one at school didn't know Aki Tomoya. Tomoya still didn't believe it because the otaku population had sharply increased, and they were still looked down upon by society. Megumi then said she was the opposite of Tomoya, that she was truly boring. Her grades weren't that great, she wasn't in any clubs, and she had never served in any class leadership positions. Megumi also admitted that she didn't have many friends, but she wasn't interested in making new ones. That's why she wasn't surprised that Tomoya didn't remember her. Tomoya said that was wrong. Megumi wasn't boring, and he asked her not to think of herself that way. He also told her to stop feeling discouraged because of misunderstandings. Tomoya could guarantee that Megumi wasn't boring, it was just that her character was more neutral, not very flashy. In other words, Megumi wasn't perfect yet, which was why she didn't stand out. Tomoya said all of this loudly, drawing the attention of the other cafe patrons. Megumi asked to interrupt his words, asking if that wasn't worse than boring. Tomoya asked her not to underestimate the boring character type because not many characters develop in a way that stays true to themselves. For example, a character with twin braids, glasses, and freckles. If Megumi combined those boring traits, she would become more charming and grab people's attention because that character would be very clear. Tomoya then asked if Megumi had any unique traits that would make her unforgettable when someone looked at her, and the answer was obviously no. Tomoya emphasized once again that Megumi was sweet from the beginning and her character didn't match up at all, and there was something that needed to be done about her personality flaws. Megumi interrupted again, asking if her personality flaws were a problem for Tomoya. Tomoya replied that it was clearly his concern because Megumi needed to be someone special and her personality needed to be clear. Megumi asked what all of that was for, and Tomoya finally said that Megumi was the girl who should be the heroine of his game. Megumi asked again if that was Tomoya's way of confessing his love to her. Tomoya was confused. Megumi did know that Tomoya was talking to her, but it felt like his gaze was looking at something far away. Tomoya thought it wasn't that he was looking far, but more like from a different dimension. He begged Megumi to help him regain his passion for creating again. Megumi was still confused by what Tomoya was talking about, and he pleaded with her to help him bring back his dream. Megumi then asked if Tomoya was dating the 2 most beautiful girls in school. Tomoya responded that there were 3 mistakes in what she just said. First, the most beautiful girls in school only existed in dating sim game and didn't exist in real life. Second, dating 2 beautiful girls at school was not true. And third, the biggest mistake was that a 2D otaku like him could have a 3D girlfriend. Megumi asked then who the girl outside the window was to Tomoya. It turned out that Eriri and Utaha were watching him from outside the cafe window. They then joined Tomoya and Megumi at their table. Megumi asked why Eriri and Utaha were here. Tomoya said that if Megumi recognized them, things wouldn't be so complicated. Megumi recognized both of them as the 2 most beautiful girls at Toyogasaki Academy. Tomoya asked Megumi to stop mixing up dating sim game with reality. But Megumi said that now she was with 3 famous people from Toyogasaki Academy. She felt like just a speck of dust among them. Tomoya told her that although Eriri and Utaha might seem intimidating, they weren't that bad. Even though they had foul mouths and bad personalities, they were otaku on a much higher level than him. Tomoya introduced Eriri and Utaha as members of his game circle. Eriri was the illustrator and Utaha was the scriptwriter. Megumi still didn't understand any of this. Utaha then said that she didn't understand it either and immediately stepped on Tomoya's foot, saying that this was how a guy who had made plans with a girl ended up hanging out with another girl instead. Tomoya introduced Megumi as the newest member of the circle and the main heroine of the game they were going to create. Megumi said that she had just learned about all of this and Tomoya assigned her a role in the project. Eriri stared at Megumi, making Megumi ask Tomoya why Eriri was staring at her. Tomoya told her not to worry about it because that's just how Eriri looked at people. Eriri then realized that the girl Tomoya had been talking about all this time was Megumi. She didn't even care if Megumi was his girlfriend, a fellow otaku, or just a friend looking for some benefits. Megumi was shocked by Eriri's sharp attitude. Tomoya explained that this was Eriri's true nature, and she was just pretending to be innocent at school. Eriri kicked Tomoya and told him not to talk like he knew her so well. Tomoya asked her not to start a fight with someone she had known for years. They continued arguing, which made Utaha tell Eriri to stop embarrassing herself, but Eriri ignored her. Utaha reminded them that it could become a problem if a Toyogasaki student was seen here and referred to Eriri as mispretending to be innocent. Eriri, annoyed, turned and kicked Utaha's leg, causing their fight to attract the attention of the cafe's other customers. Tomoya tried to calm them down, but once again, Aririri and Utaha criticized the project. Aririri said the project didn't yet convey what feelings the players were supposed to express. Utaha even suspected that Tomoya still couldn't picture what he actually wanted to create. Tomoya responded saying that Aririri and Utaha were speaking as though they were the creators. They both simultaneously declared that they were creators. Tomoya was sure they both actually got along well. Aririri said that if things kept going like this, Tomoya's dream of making the game would just stay a dream. Utaha then gave Tomoya an ultimatum. He could either start writing again or give up. Aririri suggested that Tomoya should just give up, and Utaha saw that Tomoya was almost heartbroken over the gap between his dreams and reality. According to Aririri, the concept of a fated meeting wasn't as sweet as a light novel. Utaha didn't argue with her. She said if meetings were based on fate or coincidence, the world would just be full of childhood friends ending up together. Aririri asked if there was something wrong with that, saying she didn't mean it that way. Tomoya said he had already made his decision. Aririri and Utaha asked together who Tomoya had chosen. Tomoya replied that he chose not to give up. He would rewrite as many times as needed until Aririri and Utaha approved. They thought Tomoya was going to choose one of them, but it turned out he was talking about the project. Tomoya was confident he would create the greatest dating sim game that would touch everyone's hearts. He would also turn Megumi into the main heroine who would make everyone's heart flutter. But when they looked around, Megumi was no longer sitting in her seat. They started searching for her and found out that Megumi had stood up to get a drink. None of them had noticed that she had left. The next day, Tomoya invited Megumi to meet up. Megumi came to Tomoya. Thankfully, the weather was nice today. She mentioned that the weather forecast had been doubtful, so she'd been worried earlier. She asked if Tomoya's house was nearby, saying that she occasionally passed by this street. Tomoya asked if Megumi remembered this place. Megumi said the locals called it Detective Hill because there was a detective agency nearby. However, that wasn't what Tomoya meant, so he asked why she thought he chose this place to meet. Megumi assumed it was because the place was close to his house, but Tomoya said that wasn't the reason. Megumi asked if it was because it was far away, which made Tomoya annoyed, and he explained that this was the first place they met. Megumi then said the place they met was during the entrance ceremony a year ago. Tomoya asked if she understood the purpose of today, and Megumi said that Tomoya probably wanted to talk about something, which is why he invited her to his house. Tomoya explained that this was the problem. What kind of girl would go to the house of a guy she just met? He also told Megumi not to dress like a normal person because no one had ever come to his house looking that normal. Megumi also sensed something was off. She suddenly realized that Tomoya would never invite a real-world girl to his house. Tomoya then asked why she still came if she knew he was strange and why she came so easily if he was an otaku. Megumi didn't expect to be lectured like this by the guy who had invited her. Tomoya said that up until now, Megumi had been living an aimless life, and today he was going to teach her how to live in the real world. Megumi started to suspect that maybe Tomoya's room had been designed so no one could hear her screams for help. Tomoya told Megumi to prepare herself because he was going to fill her head with moe content. They entered Tomoya's house and Megumi was amazed by the sight of his room, which truly reflected the life of an otaku. Tomoya blamed Megumi for acting so casually and said that she should have immediately commented on how hot it was and opened the window or pretended to sit on the bed and act awkwardly. She should have acted like that. Megumi asked why Tomoya expected her to ruin the mood by being tense like that. Tomoya was confident he could get the right reaction from Megumi soon. Today was a training session to enhance Megumi's 2D heroine sensitivity. Tomoya then offered Megumi all the dating sim game visual novels he had, telling her they were all famous ones that could make her laugh, cry, or even faint. Megumi chose the shortest one. Tomoya selected a dating sim game titled Dear Memories, a legendary game that had sold over 300,000 copies and was adapted into an anime. The game began, and Megumi chose the option to give the character a gift instead of inviting them home or suggesting a night view. Tomoya said that her choice was wrong, but Megumi argued that giving a gift was a natural choice to make their date memorable. Tomoya considered Megumi to be insensitive. He told her that the point of the game wasn't about giving a keepsake, but about creating memories together. Megumi said that what mattered most was the memory they shared, not the gift itself. Tomoya agreed, mentioning that giving a gift could lead to awkwardness after a breakup. He then told Megumi to take a break while he explained something. He began teaching her about the heroine of a dating sim game, something Megumi didn't know much about. He explained that heroines in dating sim game were representations, not robots that always give the same answers when a player clicks on certain points. They were warm-blooded humans, more captivating than real girls. That's how Megumi should be. Megumi responded, saying that this meant the heroines could change or even break up with the player. Tomoya couldn't even imagine a 2D girl breaking up with him. He couldn't live without her. They finished the game and Tomoya was crying after hearing a particular scene. He asked Megumi if she didn't think that scene was incredibly sad. Megumi said that she should have been moved. Tomoya believed that Megumi finally understood that the dialogue and the inserted songs were truly amazing. But this wasn't the real climax yet. After this, something even more amazing would happen, so she should get ready to be in awe, because to save the main character, the female character was willing to make a sacrifice. Megumi said it was very interesting and that maybe she could enjoy playing it peacefully if no one had spoiled the plot for her. She would have definitely cried. The game ended and Megumi didn't expect the plot to end so unexpectedly. Tomoya was also surprised because Megumi turned out to be someone who enjoyed going on adventures. Tomoya asked her what she thought after finishing the game. Megumi felt mixed emotions but found it enjoyable in the end. The graphics were sweet, the voice actors were dramatic, the music was good, and the story was interesting. She also learned about dating sim game and anime like this, but that didn't mean she didn't know anything. Tomoya was happy. There was no doubt that Megumi was the right girl for him. Tomoya said that this was the kind of heroine he wanted to instill in Megumi. Megumi responded, asking if that meant she was suddenly going to die like in the game. Tomoya asked her not to compare the game to the type of scumbags who kill off heroines just for an emotional response. But it seemed like Megumi didn't quite understand. Tomoya explained using a metaphor, no great weapon is made carelessly and critiques shouldn't make someone lose their way. Instead, they should look at the bigger picture with clear eyes. He also suggested considering the most captivating interpretation for the players. Suddenly, Tomoya remembered the criticisms from Eriri and Utaha. He realized that he himself was the one who didn't understand. Tomoya thanked Megumi because, thanks to her, he had learned the most important lesson of all. After that, Megumi said her goodbyes to head home. But Tomoya told her that there was a sequel to the game. And this was the beginning of the story, the birth and rise of it. He wouldn't spoil the plot and quickly set up the game again. However, Megumi said it was probably already midnight and the game wouldn't be finished by then. Tomoya replied that his parents were out of town for a picnic, and since it was Saturday and the next day was a school holiday, he insisted Megumi stay over. He begged her to stay and help him become a true man. Megumi was, of course, shocked. She said she called her parents to let them know she'd be home late. Tomoya asked if Megumi was sure because in this situation, he wouldn't dare take responsibility if anything happened. Megumi replied, asking if they were going to stay up all night playing the game. Tomoya called Megumi, telling her that Eriri and Utaha hadn't agreed to his project yet. He realized that becoming a creator was much harder than he thought. Megumi asked when the next deadline was, and Tomoya said it was the end of Golden Week. That would be his last chance. The long holiday started today, but even so, time was of the essence. Tomoya needed to focus on the game from this point onward. Megumi mentioned that there would be a proficiency test in the first week, but Tomoya asked her to forget about it for now. They needed to discuss the project. They had to get Eriri and Utaha involved and create the best dating sim game ever. Unfortunately, Megumi couldn't come because she was on vacation in Hokkaido with her family until the end of Golden Week. Tomoya motivated himself to start the project right away while he still had 4 days left before the deadline. He banned himself from watching anime, playing games, or reading light novels. He even put tape over his anime shelf to prevent himself from being tempted. However, he couldn't resist. He initially planned to read just one book to give himself a boost, but ended up reading several books and fell asleep. His attempt to stay focused had backfired. He decided to step out for a drink. Suddenly, he heard a voice asking for cola. He went to the fridge and grabbed 2 drinks, only to realize someone was in his room. He quickly went back to his room with the drinks, shocked to see Eriri there. Eriri told him to put the drinks down in a safe spot because she was afraid of spilling them on her sketch. Tomoya felt his schedule was ruined because Eriri had just barged into his room. Eriri had rung the bell earlier but got no response. It had been a few years since Eriri last visited, as they hadn't spoken to each other in years. Tomoya asked why she had come, and it turned out she wanted to work on her drawing for an event this weekend. Tomoya yelled, warning her not to visit a guy's house to work on inappropriate drawings. But what could she do? She had a deadline this month and couldn't draw at home because her father was hosting a garden party with many guests. Eriri couldn't just lock herself in her room, especially since even the foreign minister was at the party. Tomoya asked if her appearance at home was meant to seem disconnected from the girl he knew. They both went back to their work. Eriri then asked about the progress on Tomoya's project. Tomoya said he still had 3 days left and plenty of time to work on it. Eriri concluded that there hadn't been any progress, because when a creator starts using the number of days left as an excuse, it's clear they're behind schedule. This hit Tomoya hard and made him feel even more down. Eriri told him to just give up, saying that creating a game was too difficult for him. Tomoya replied that they still didn't know the outcome, especially since they had made many things together in the past that turned out bad. They used to make ugly drawings, bad stories, and happily shared them with each other. But Eriri said she didn't remember them ever doing that. Now she was part of a famous circle, and whatever Eriri could do, Tomoya could do as well. Tomoya would do what he loved, and one day he would become a creator more popular than Iriri. Iriri said that if Tomoya could do that, he wouldn't need to worry about her. Hearing that, Tomoya thought that Iriri had come here to cheer him up. Iriri yelled in frustration and told Tomoya not to think weird things about her. Tomoya called Iriri an ultimate tsundere, but Iriri replied that she wasn't being tsundere anymore, she just didn't care about him at all. Suddenly, the doorbell rang and Iriri got upset because someone had arrived just when she and Tomoya were talking about something important. Iriri immediately jumped onto the bed to look out the window, and she was shocked to see who had come to Tomoya's house. It was Utaha. She mentioned that Tomoya's room was tittier than she had imagined, even though it was clearly the room of an otaku. Tomoya quickly cleaned up the drinking glass and Iriri's pencil, and he asked Utaha why she had come over since it was the first time she had visited his house. Even though it was Utaha's first time coming here, she didn't feel nervous at all. In fact, she had been looking forward to spending time alone with Tomoya today. Utaha cornered Tomoya against the wall and said that he couldn't run away from her anymore. Tomoya's house was indeed known for treating guests like royalty, but Utaha's touch made him nervous, and he yelled that he would make sure she got home safely. Utaha was actually just joking. She had brought cake and said she only came to visit the frontline soldier and ask how the battle was going. Tomoya said that he hadn't even started yet. Utaha had been hoping for more than that. Tomoya admitted that he had learned from his past failures and that approach wouldn't work on people who worked in the same field. Utaha grabbed Tomoya's hand and told him not to push himself too hard with this. If he gave up now, his old life as a livestock pig would be waiting for him, and she was sure that kind of life would be tough for Tomoya. Tomoya said that hearing himself being directly called a livestock pig made his feelings a little mixed. Utaha said that the life of a creator may seem glamorous, but it wasn't as beautiful as it looked. Deadlines could make people go crazy, the competition was tough, and no one knew when their talent would disappear. Tomoya didn't want to hear excuses from a newcomer whose name was just rising. Utaha also mentioned that the worst part was dealing with the haters. When getting good reviews, they'd mock it as a marketing tactic. If the book sales were bad, they'd laugh about it, and when offering reasons, they'd refuse to take any responsibility. Utaha got emotional just thinking about the haters. If she could, she'd want to gather them all up and deal with them all at once. Tomoya tried to calm Utaha down. She said that's why Tomoya should keep subscribing to her books as usual. Tomoya remembered Utaha's words that she still couldn't imagine the game he was going to create. Those words really touched his heart and made him realize that he still didn't know much. That's when he figured out what he wanted to make and whether he could find a solution to get Utaha to agree to it. Tomoya begged Utaha to give him some time because he would work hard to make a project proposal that she would approve of. Utaha couldn't stop him because he was so determined, so she told him to do whatever he wanted. However, as a trade-off, she wouldn't extend the deadline. She would wait for him until the end of the vacation. Tomoya promised to keep fighting to create the project until Utaha would beg him to join in. One last piece of advice from Utaha was that if Tomoya was serious about creating a circle and making a game together, he should include all the members in it. Otherwise, the quality of the product wouldn't be good no matter how hard he tried, and Tomoya wouldn't be able to stay motivated. So for now, all the members should do their best. Utaha also mentioned that Tomoya should have hidden Iriri's bike. Tomoya just realized that Iriri's bike was in his yard. Iriri came out from the closet and yelled in frustration, calling Utaha's name. Tomoya told her that if she wanted to curse him, she shouldn't hide it. Iriri responded saying there was no way she could come out while Utaha was in the room. However, Utaha seemed to know everything, even without Iriri appearing. Iriri immediately decided to go home. Tomoya called Megumi and asked how she was feeling, if she was happy. Megumi asked about the deadline for the project, but Tomoya told her not to worry about it and just enjoy her vacation. He was confident he could handle it. Before ending the call, Megumi asked what exactly made Tomoya interested in her, whether it was the times they spent together or something about her that he liked or didn't like. Tomoya responded by asking if Megumi was seriously ill and didn't want to continue living. Megumi's question wasn't as serious as Tomoya thought. He started thinking about all the moments with Megumi, which actually felt enjoyable, and he realized there was one thing he might want to change. He hoped Megumi could grow more. Megumi then asked if Tomoya wanted her to become a harsher person. Tomoya clarified that he didn't mean that. Iriri and Utaha were the harsh ones in his life. Megumi then wondered why Iriri and Utaha were so different, and said she would think about it herself before hanging up the phone. Tomoya began thinking about creating a proposal, but once again, he ended up reading a book, browsing a light novel blog, and eventually falling asleep. Once again, he had wasted time. That night, he realized an entire day had passed without him accomplishing anything. He quickly started packing up all his anime books, tapes, and games from his shelf. He still had 2 days left, but it felt like today had been wasted as well. His mind started to feel like it had hit a dead end. He felt like he had no talent at all. He then went to the place where he had met Megumi, only to find that it was just an ordinary hill. He had come here hoping for some inspiration or an idea to come to him, but even now, he couldn't see anything. No cherry blossoms in the air, no heroine in a one-piece dress standing at the top of the hill. Tomoya started wondering if maybe his dream was coming to an end. His dream had started here, but could it really end here? Suddenly, Megumi threw her hat in front of Tomoya, and cherry blossoms started blowing through the air. She said it had been a long time since they last met. Tomoya called out Megumi's name, and Megumi remarked that it was unlike him to recognize her. Megumi walked toward him and picked up her hat. Tomoya asked what she was actually doing. Megumi put the hat on and called Tomoya by his real name. She then asked if the kind of meeting Tomoya was hoping for was something like this, whether in an anime, a game, or a light novel. She also asked if this was how the girl Tomoya's dreams would talk, behave, and fall in love. She questioned whether she passed the test, asking if she could be the heroine of the story Tomoya was trying to create and if she could help him. Tomoya felt nervous and asked if Megumi wasn't supposed to be in Hokkaido right now. She replied that she had come back early, actually 3 days ago. She didn't expect the deadline to fall on the last day of the long holiday, so she decided not to go. Tomoya was surprised that Megumi would miss her family vacation for something so trivial. Megumi explained that if she didn't help him, Tomoya would keep nagging her. Tomoya felt bad and suggested that Megumi could have stopped by after her trip. But Megumi thought she wouldn't be of much use at a meeting. She had returned because she wanted to join the circle's activities to stay motivated. It wasn't just her. Ariuri and Utaha had been a big help too. Ariuri had even redesigned a dress, making it as close to Tomoya's taste as possible, with a more mini, shy, and 2D concept. It turned out that it wasn't just Tomoya's taste, but the dream of every moe otaku. The way she spoke and acted was directly taken from Ugaha's script. Acting really needed to be precise. Tomoya praised Megumi for being able to withstand the training, even though Utaha had once written scripts for the drama club and had expelled 3 club members. But according to Megumi, she still found it fun to be trained by Utaha. Maybe she could even get along with Ariuri and Utaha, as well as the rest of the circle. Tomoya didn't expect Megumi to be willing to do this, and he also believed in her dream, which might not be real or might just be a coincidence. Honestly, Megumi didn't fully understand what Tomoya wanted to do, but she believed he was truly serious about pursuing his dream. Megumi encouraged Tomoya to make her the happy heroine who would make everyone envious. Tomoya promised to make Megumi a heroine who would make everyone's heart race. Megumi blushed when Tomoya said that. Tomoya then said they should also make sure to get Ariuri and Utaha involved to create the greatest dating sim game. Tomoya took Megumi's hand and led her with him. The meeting had to be held right away since the deadline was the next day. Megumi asked if the project hadn't made any progress yet, but Tomoya told her she was free to suggest ideas, like whispering them to him in moe style like before. Megumi mentioned that she had school tomorrow, but Tomoya reassured her, saying that he'd let her leave at 7 a.m. Megumi then bargained, saying she could leave at 6 a.m. and Tomoya agreed. It turned out that Ariuri and Utaha had been watching them the whole time. Utaha remarked that it seemed like she and Ariuri had gotten dragged into this issue. Ariuri said that her project proposal wasn't finished yet and she wasn't sure if it would be done by tomorrow. Utaha joked that it seemed like the sudden main heroine had appeared and the battle was over. Ariuri looked upset seeing Tomoya and Megumi walking together, which made Utaha ask if seeing that bothered Ariuri why she was helping Megumi at all. Ariuri said that she didn't care at all and could even say it had nothing to do with her. Utaha warned Ariuri that if she didn't handle her stubbornness soon, she might regret it one day. Ariuri stubbornly replied that she didn't believe she could ever work with someone like Utaha. Utaha responded that she was really looking forward to working with Ariuri. Ariuri remained stubborn, saying she didn't want to work with a writer like Utaha. Suddenly, Megumi turned around and waved at them, but Ariuri just stuck her tongue out at her. Today, Utaha's manager Machida Sonoko called her to let her know there was an interview scheduled for tomorrow. Utaha agreed to do the interview, saying she had made progress on the storyline for her new book. Sonoko, however, questioned whether Utaha's words could be trusted. Utaha then asked if she had ever lied to her. Sonoko admitted that while Utaha had never lied about her books, when it came to deadlines, Utaha lied nearly every time. Utaha used this as a reason to withdraw her earlier statement about being available for the interview tomorrow. She said she wouldn't be able to make it. Sonoko pleaded with Utaha, explaining that the exclusive interview about Kasumi Utaku's, Utaha's pen name, latest book would be featured in several pages of the upcoming issue of a magazine, and it had already been announced in the previous issue. However, Utaha remained firm, saying she worked on paper, not in front of others. Sonoko understood, even though she had already made arrangements and thought Utaha would be pleased. Then Sonoko said something that shocked Utaha so much that she accidentally bumped her foot into a chair. Meanwhile, Megumi was riding the train with Tomoya. She mentioned that she had finished reading a light novel called Koisaru Metronome. Tomoya was surprised and asked her what she thought about it. Megumi said that because of the novel, she had been sleeping less, she couldn't relax until she finished reading it. At first, Megumi thought light novels were only for guys, but this one made a woman cry. Tomoya felt proud of her, and Megumi asked if she could keep all the light novels. Tomoya said she could, since he had given them to her for free. He even still had 2 more sets, one for him to read and one for his collection. Megumi was really happy, and Tomoya promised to buy her more when she ran out of books. Although Megumi wasn't used to the life of an otaku, she couldn't believe that Utaha was the one who wrote this book. Tomoya confirmed that it was true. When people think of a high school girl being a light novel author, they usually picture something typical of the genre. But when they see Utaha at school, no one would guess she was a romance novel author. This meant Utaha really kept her character in check, and Tomoya told Megumi that she should learn a lot from Utaha. Megumi, however, said that it was impossible for an ordinary person to be the smartest student and a successful novel author at the same time. Tomoya was confident that it wasn't just God-given talent, but Utaha had also worked hard, sweating blood to get to where she was. He even considered Utaha to be his god. Megumi understood that Tomoya was a huge fan of Utaha. He couldn't wait for her next book, and this time, he hoped there would be an anime adaptation. Megumi was also curious about the plot, wondering if it would have a love story similar to Koisaru Metronome. Tomoya said he would ask Utaha about it, but Megumi doubted Utaha would reveal something so important, since talking about it might be considered unprofessional. Tomoya fell silent upon hearing Megumi's words. Megumi then asked why Tomoya's reaction seemed like it triggered some past trauma. Tomoya assured her that he hadn't been hurt in any way and asked Megumi not to misunderstand. Megumi didn't want to go any further into the topic. Tomoya said that today would be the day he could ask Utaha everything he wanted. Today, Tomoya was about to interview Utaha, but Utaha asked him what all this was about. It turned out that a week ago, Tomoya had received an email from Utaha's assistant editor offering a job. Sonoko explained that since Utaha was shy around strangers, reluctant to work with others, and quick to get emotional, a typical news writer wouldn't be able to interview her. That's why Sonoko thought Utaha might be more willing to do it with someone she knew. Utaha said she just wanted to go home and sleep. Tomoya immediately stopped her, begging her to agree to the interview. Utaha repeated that she was shy, hard to work with, and easily irritated. Tomoya agreed with her and let her start walking away. But then he quickly apologized, admitting that he had mixed politeness with his personal opinions. Tomoya had guessed Utaha wouldn't want to do it, but when he found out it was an opportunity to learn more about Utaha's new book before anyone else, he couldn't turn it down. Sonoko suggested that Utaha just accept it, pointing out that it was just a small request from a writer who had already sold 500,000 copies of her book. Utaha was shocked that Sonoko, as a grown woman, would tarnish the workplace by bringing an amateur into it like that. Eventually, Utaha agreed to do the interview with Tomoya. He began the interview, which would be featured in Undead magazine. Regarding her new book series, Tomoya asked if this new series would be similar to Koisaru Metronome, which was set in Wago City. Utaha confirmed that she had intentionally made it similar. Tomoya then asked if that meant the new book was connected to the previous one in some way, like if it would take place at the same school or feature the same characters. Utaha started to feel sleepy and only answered with one word, possibly. Tomoya reminded her not to fall asleep after just 30 seconds of the interview. Utaha couldn't hold back her sleepiness because she had stayed up late working on the plot for her new series. However, Sonoko pointed out that she was the one worried because Utaha hadn't made any progress despite staying up all night and hadn't even written a single draft. Utaha then fell into a deep sleep. The table was now covered with various energy drinks to keep Utaha from falling asleep again. Tomoya continued with his questions. He mentioned that the continuation of Utaha's book Koisaru Metronome was highly anticipated, but it seemed like Utaha was under pressure because of the high expectations. Utaha simply said one word, no. Tomoya clarified, asking if she meant that no matter how much her life changed, it wouldn't affect her work, and she would continue to give her best. Utaha said that honestly, she wasn't sure her new series would sell as well as her previous one, purely because of her own abilities. Tomoya asked if it was because of the support from her readers that made Koizuru Metronome a hit and hoped that everyone would like her new series. Utaha remained indifferent in her response. Tomoya then praised Utaha for her outstanding involvement, saying it was the key to her success. However, Utaha responded that it was because of Tomoya that Koizuru Metronome sold so well. Tomoya insisted that his actions didn't have much of an impact. Sonoko, however, pointed out that Utaha's statement was half true because there had been a significant boost in sales after the book was featured on Tomoya's site. They had originally planned to summarize the book in volumes 2 or 3, and it had never even been posted, let alone reprinted. Honestly, the book wouldn't have appeared at all if it weren't for the hardcore fans of Fantastic Bunko. Tomoya quickly asked them not to reveal such details, adding that the publisher was at fault for not doing their job properly. Utaha agreed, especially since Fushikoa Shoten was indifferent to newcomers. Sonoko confirmed this, saying their sales department was completely unenthusiastic. Tomoya was feeling confused about what he would write for the interview results. He was also getting exhausted from conducting it and suggested speeding things up. Utaha, noticing how long they had been there, remarked that the interview didn't seem to have much substance. Tomoya explained that it was because the interview was difficult to work with. Utaha, on the other hand, blamed Tomoya for trying to understand her unpleasant comments. Tomoya then suggested wrapping up the interview with one clear answer. He asked Utaha to tell the readers what she hoped for in order to finish the next series. Utaha became more serious and said that she had recently brought her best work, Koizuru Metronome, to a happy ending. As a woman, she had no personal connection to it, but she was lucky to have the chance to try something new, thanks to the support of readers who had backed a book written by a complete beginner. To repay her readers, she would do her best in her next project, and even more so, she really hoped for continued support from them. Utaha then asked Tomoya for his opinion on her answer. Tomoya praised her, saying that her gratitude was reflected in her books. He said that was the Utaha he knew. Utaha reminded him to write projects in the plural form for future work, as it meant she got 2 projects to handle. Tomoya was surprised to hear that Utaha would be joining his project. She mentioned that she would be joining Tomoya's circle next week and told him to get ready because she didn't want anyone slacking off. Utaha also expressed some concern about whether Eriri would join. Tomoya thanked her and Utaha added that he should be ready to work with her. Tomoya grabbed Utaha's hand and said that in his life, he would never do anything to ruin her. Sonoko suddenly woke up and called them both to start a meeting to discuss work priorities. Tomoya was startled and asked since when Sonoko had woken up and started paying attention to them, especially since it was already late at night. Sonoko replied that they were used to working late. Tomoya then realized how tough life in publishing could be. Meanwhile, Eriri was standing in front of the AV lab. She said to herself that she had already decided whether she would join or not, but she knew Tomoya couldn't do it alone and thought maybe she could lend him a little help. Suddenly, Utaha spoke up. Eriri was surprised to see Utaha there as well. Tomoya told her she was late, even though they had already started earlier. Eriri shouted, asking how Utaha had arrived before her. Utaha calmly replied that everyone had been told to gather there at 2:30 p.m., and it was Eriri who was late. Utaha then added that she had been personally convinced by Tomoya to come, so she had no choice but to join. Eriri got upset because she hadn't been convinced in the same way, and Tomoya quickly told Utaha not to say things that could cause misunderstandings. Utaha then called Eriri someone who could never be satisfied unless she won, saying she would be a terrible girlfriend and was the type of person who would lose everything because she couldn't control her emotions. Eriri blew up and Tomoya stepped in, taking responsibility for the whole situation. He then started explaining the schedule for the dating sim game project, mentioning that he planned to finish the game by December and have it ready for a winter Comic-Con debut, meaning their legend would begin with the new year. However, both Eriri and Utaha disagreed, saying it was impossible. Eriri objected because she was also involved in other clubs and had commitments with her circle. Utaha also had a problem with the timing as it clashed with her book writing schedule. Utaha stepped forward and began rescheduling, but Eriri didn't agree because she also didn't have enough time to finish her work. She changed it again, but Utaha disagreed with Eriri's suggestion, and the two of them kept arguing on the schedule. Tomoya asked them to stop fighting. He just wanted them to focus on the story and character design. After a bit of back and forth, they finally agreed on what they were working on and could proceed with the project. Tomoya then asked what he could do now. Eriri and Utaha both asked him to buy snacks. Tomoya reminded them that he was the president, producer, and director of the circle. However, Eriri insisted that Tomoya should focus on designing the characters, and Utaha also suggested that he focus on the plot, script, and everything else. In the end, Tomoya gave in and went to buy the snacks. Suddenly, Utaha remembered something important. The key to the project's success was raising funds for expenses like DVD production, packaging, manuals, printing costs, and more. The estimated total could range from 100,000 yen to 1 million yen. Tomoya was shocked to hear that because no high school student had that kind of money. However, Ariri argued, explaining the details of the costs at Comiket, starting from book sales, printing fees, and profits. Similarly, Utaha explained the breakdown of her first book sales, printing costs, and royalties she earned. The amount was considerable, and Tomoya asked if they had already filed a tax return. Seeing that Tomoya seemed overwhelmed by the budget, Utaha offered to lend him the money, but not for free, and assured him it wouldn't come with high interest. Utaha only asked for a small favor in return. Tomoya moved closer and Utaha was about to whisper something, but Ariri quickly separated their heads, which had been close together. She was upset and hit Tomoya. Utaha said that financial issues couldn't be avoided, and someone had to know how to handle them. Ariri yelled at Utaha to stop pretending, saying that wasn't the issue she had with her. The two of them started arguing again over this, and Tomoya intervened. He wondered why fighting seemed to be a regular thing in their circle. He told them he would do something about the money issue, but in return, Ariri had to be serious about drawing moe characters, and Utaha had to write a script that could make people cry. They agreed to their respective tasks. Suddenly, Megumi asked what she was supposed to do. That was when the three of them realized that Megumi was also in the room. The next day, Tomoya woke up early. He was working hard to meet his goal of raising 1 million yen, and he was confident he could exceed it by creating a dating sim game with the help of all the circle members. Tomoya started his day delivering newspapers, then worked as a laborer carrying heavy items. After school, he worked at a rental shop and a restaurant. He believed that he could make Megumi the best heroine ever and impress everyone. While Tomoya was working at the restaurant, he was surprised to see Megumi walk in with a guy to have dinner at the place where he worked. Megumi was just as surprised to learn that Tomoya worked part-time there. Tomoya asked about the guy calling out Megumi for being heartless toward him. At school, Megumi explained that the guy was her cousin. The day before, her whole family had visited, but the parents went out to do something, so instead of waiting around, she went out to dinner with her cousin. Megumi had no idea that Tomoya worked at that restaurant, even though Tomoya had visited it once a month. Tomoya was still upset. He had told Megumi that she needed to stand out more, but he didn't mean in a bad way like that time. He asked if she understood her current position. Megumi realized that she was just a second-year high school student with no noticeable presence dragged into an otaku circle at school. Tomoya said that was the old Megumi before she changed. The real Megumi was the heroine with pure beauty, the kind that could make people's hearts flutter. Megumi didn't know how to respond. Tomoya continued, explaining that a heroine exists for the protagonist, someone who would never do anything bad. She would never leave him for another guy. Megumi was confused by Tomoya's words, especially since the guy from last night was just her cousin. Tomoya pointed out that it was exactly because he was her cousin that it was a problem. Tomoya then shared a story from a dating sim game he once watched. A long time ago, when the heroine visited her grandmother's house, she sprained her ankle. Her cousin carried her home, and the two of them ended up walking back late at night, crying and becoming a bittersweet love memory. Tomoya pleaded with Megumi, saying she might find it unreasonable, annoying, or downright stupid, but he didn't want to see her with her cousin again. At the very least, Megumi should be a heroine who was only there for the protagonist, until the game was finished. Megumi apologized and told him that she and her cousin were going on a trip this weekend. Today, Ariri and Megumi are starting to work on their dating sim game project. Ariri asks Megumi to show an expression as if she's offended. Megumi, looking a bit confused, is then instructed by Ariri to imagine a situation where she has a date planned, but the guy doesn't show up and she has to scold him. Ariri even demonstrates the expression herself. However, Megumi replies that such behavior doesn't happen in real life, and so their circle's activities officially begin today. Tomoya is in charge of preparing snacks for the group. He notices Utaha typing "ah" repeatedly on her laptop and realizes it's her way of signaling that she wants to be fed. Tomoya complies, feeding her a snack which Utaha eagerly eats. She then types more as a request for another bite, and Tomoya feeds her again. Meanwhile, Tomoya occasionally glances at Ariri and Megumi, who are engaged in a discussion. Ariri asks Tomoya to buy her a new pencil because hers is broken. Turning back to Megumi, Ariri asks if she can manage to make a frustrated expression. She then instructs Megumi to imagine channeling all her anger into her temples. Megumi tries but still can't quite pull it off. Ariri then switches tactics, asking her to make a foolish expression. Megumi cycles through all the expressions she can muster, but none of them seem to satisfy Ariri. Frustrated, Ariri complains that Megumi isn't able to express any emotions typical of manga characters, and she's at a loss for how to handle it. Megumi, equally unsure, suggests that she wants to learn how to improve on her own. She stands up, walking around while reciting lines that Ariri had demonstrated earlier. Ariuri admits she's never faced a challenge this difficult before. She muses that if Megumi truly can emote, they could just make her play a character like Ayanami Rie. But Megumi's personality is too soft and half-hearted for that kind of role. Tomoya agrees, pointing out that Megumi's expressions are so subtle that her neutral face is her most distinctive feature. Ariuri is almost ready to give up, lamenting that she's never encountered someone so difficult to work with. Tomoya reminds them that they're on a tight deadline for the character design. Ariuri asks if they should have a meeting at Tomoya's house this weekend to get everything finalized. Suddenly, Tomoya asks Ariuri if she's ever been on a date. The question takes Ariuri by surprise. She presses her pencil so hard against the paper that it scratches deeply, startling Utaha into dropping her laptop. Ariuri yells so loudly that Tomoya wonders if his question was too serious. Ariuri scolds him, saying that hearing a question like that from an otaku like Tomoya could give someone a heart attack. She sarcastically asks if Tomoya is trying to ask her out. Unfortunately for Ariuri, that's not what Tomoya meant at all. He explains that it's just a gaming strategy exercise, imagining scenarios like reluctantly accompanying someone to the mall to shop for clothes or other girly items. He asks if such outings count as dates. Ariuri declares that she wouldn't go in the first place because malls are too crowded. She adds that if she needs clothes, she can just order them online or have a coordinator bring them over. Tomoya tells her to drop her spoiled, ikikomori rich girl attitude and presses her to think about what she'd do in such a situation. Tomoya insists that Ariuri might have useful insights since she's good at hiding her true nature at school. Realizing he's gone off topic, Tomoya apologizes for his strange comments and asks her to forget about it. Ariuri advises Tomoya that for his game strategy, he needs to be more attuned to the mood of the situation. She suggests observing interactions carefully, keeping the conversation flowing naturally, and if all else fails, just faking a smile. So even though Tomoya doesn't always understand what others are saying, all he needs to do is smile and avoid asking irrelevant or off-topic questions. Most importantly, he must not do something silly like interrupting the conversation. Tomoya, however, argues that wouldn't it be more boring that way? He believes it's better to dive deeper into the topic while still having a one-on-one moment. Ariuri dismisses this as just a casual homegrown game strategy and insists Tomoya should stick to his otaku zone. Tomoya expresses his desire to stay true to himself, but Ariuri claims that's impossible because everyone has their own secret side. Tomoya counters by asking if Megumi isn't an exception, since she isn't an otaku, but still mingles comfortably with them while staying true to herself. Tomoya admits he's amazed by Megumi. That's why he adds he doesn't think he should force her to smile. This annoys Ariuri. She had a feeling their conversation was really about real-life dating. She accuses Tomoya of planning to ask Megumi out and implies he's using Ariuri as a backup. Feeling deceived, she says she's done. But Tomoya clarifies that he just wants to go shopping, to the opening sale at Rokutenmo Mall. To Ariuri, though, that still sounds like a date. Tomoya suddenly asks, does that still count as a date even if it's with your cousin? This leaves Ariuri completely baffled about what Tomoya is getting at. Suddenly, the sound of Utaha laughing fills the room. She's typing away furiously, apparently struck with inspiration. Utaha exclaims that the plotline has come to her, excitedly narrating a scene she's just written. Tomoya and Ariuri exchange glances. Ariuri comments that moments like this often arise during creative processes, calling it the dark side of being a creator. Tomoya asks Ariuri if Utaha is simply getting carried away, to which Utaha, still full of energy, declares that Tomoya must be punished immediately. Meanwhile, Megumi continues practicing her expressions late into the night. The next day, Utaha hands in the fruits of her all-nighter. She stayed up to finalize her storyline. Tomoya praises her for her effort. Megumi seems genuinely surprised that Utaha managed to produce so much content in just one night. Ariuri points out that's probably 5 times the size of Tomoya's proposal. Tomoya admits Ariuri's jab stings, but he can't deny that Utaha is amazing for pulling it off. Utaha, however, requests that Tomoya read it first before giving his opinion, then says she wants to take a nap. Without another word, she falls asleep on the bench. Tomoya begins reading her script aloud. It starts with the protagonist Azumi Seiji, whose family is forced to move to the outskirts of town because of his parents' work. He transfers to a new school, and on a hill covered in falling cherry blossoms, he has a fateful encounter with a girl. Megumi asks who will design the protagonist. Ariuri answers that she'll base his face on the most handsome man she can imagine. Tomoya continues reading. The next day, Seiji meets the same girl again, and it turns out they're in the same class. The girl's name is Kano Meguri. Slowly but surely, the distance between them closes until they confess their feelings to one another. Tomoya remarks that the character feels similar to Megumi, but with a bit more emotional pull. However, Meguri's personality starts to change. Her strange obsession with Seiji begins to surface, accompanied by subconscious fears and memories from before her birth. Concerned about her behavior, Seiji confronts Meguri and suddenly, she says something unexpected to him. Tomoya asked Megumi to read Meguri's dialogue. Megumi complied and began reading the scene, where it turned out Meguri called Seiji Big Brother. Tomoya continued narrating the story. Meguri started recalling her past life of forbidden love and a family tragedy. Each time Meguri remembered those memories, a series of events unfolded between her and Seiji. Eventually, a foe from their shared past emerged to stand between them. Tomoya suddenly yelled out because what happened next was absolutely crazy. Driven by their resolve to protect one another and defeat their enemy, the two lovers ended their sibling relationship. Megumi commented that siblings falling in love doesn't happen, but Tomoya argued that it absolutely does in the world of 2D. Eriri agreed with Tomoya and urged Megumi to take it more seriously. Tomoya continued reading. The fight finally ended, and the two broke the chains binding them to their past, embracing their forbidden love as they faced an uncertain future together. He then asked Megumi to read Meguri's lines again. Eriri remarked that even if they had a script, if the acting was half-hearted, it would still feel empty. Megumi apologized, admitting she wasn't used to 2D-style behavior. Wataha woke up and asked Tomoya what he thought about the storyline. Tomoya said it was genuinely interesting and felt completely different from her previous works. He praised the tension and shocking twists as truly remarkable. Eriri chimed in, pointing out that the heroine being a reincarnated younger sister and also a yandere wasn't too far off from Wataha's usual style, but she admitted it was decent. Megumi commented that the setting felt a bit rigid. Wataha responded by saying it seemed like no one had any real objections and asked if this could be considered the final concept. Eriri agreed, saying she needed to finalize the character designs, so it would be better if the plot was locked in. Tomoya acknowledged that the storyline was intriguing, but he needed more time to think about its ending. Eriri grew irritated, arguing that it should be good enough as it was, especially since everyone, including Tomoya, had already said it was interesting. But Tomoya disagreed. He admitted the story was engaging and exceptional, but said it still didn't feel satisfying to him. Eriri, now frustrated, claimed that subjective critiques like his wouldn't help anyone improve. Tomoya admitted he was at fault and wished he could explain himself better. Even so, he insisted that in its current state, he couldn't call it his work. This infuriated Eriri further, and she snapped, telling him he should just write it himself then. Wataha intervened, warning that if Eriri said things like that, the project would fall apart. There are things a director should never say to a creator and vice versa, and Eriri had crossed that line. Eriri, feeling even more irritated, asked who she was even doing all this for, but Wataha coolly replied that it was certainly not for her. Wataha then walked out. As she passed Tomoya, she remarked that once again he had given her an answer. Afterward, Megumi suggested postponing their plans to go to Rokutenbo Mall, pointing out that Tomoya wasn't in the right mindset. She thought it would be better to go another day. However, Tomoya insisted they should still go on their date tomorrow, and it seemed Eriri overheard him from outside the room. The next day, Tomoya and Megumi went to Rokutenbo Mall together. The mall was packed with people and the lines were long, but Megumi found the whole experience enjoyable. Tomoya, on the other hand, felt uneasy. Megumi asked him if the crowds were making him feel sick. Tomoya admitted he could handle it for now, but only because it wasn't a gathering of otaku under someone's command. Tomoya then asked if the overwhelming chaos didn't bother Megumi. She replied that whether it was normal or not, it was just casual chatter to her. Then the mall doors finally opened. Tomoya pushed his way through the crowd to enter. Once inside, they found a bench and sat down, both feeling utterly exhausted. Tomoya apologized, pointing out that they had queued since early morning only for him to suggest taking a break. However, Megumi was the one who apologized instead. Tomoya couldn't understand why people couldn't line up properly. He found it especially frustrating that the mall staff merely monitored the crowd from the front and back without trying to manage the chaos. Many shoppers cut in line without hesitation, and to top it off, the sheer number of couples in the crowd was overwhelming. Tomoya grumbled, clearly annoyed at all the normal people present. Megumi pointed out that technically, by being there together, she and Tomoya were also contributing to that number. Tomoya called this the baptism ritual of Rokutenbo Mall. Megumi, not understanding what he meant, suggested it might be better to visit the mall a month after its opening. Tomoya disagreed, saying the situation would likely remain the same. He clarified that it wasn't the number of people present, but their attitudes. He compared it to Japan's largest queues, saying they weren't nearly this chaotic. There, no one would cut through corridors, take shortcuts on escalators, or push ahead in line. Everyone respected the system, and the enthusiasm of the participants ensured the event's success. Megumi deduced that he was referring to comic-related events. Tomoya corrected her, saying it wasn't just comic-related. It was the comic market, or Comic-It, held twice a year in the summer and winter. He explained it was Japan's and possibly the world's largest doujinshi sales event, drawing over 500,000 attendees. Yet Megumi still described it as comic-related, much to Tomoya's chagrin. Seeing Tomoya's passion light up as he spoke, Megumi remarked that he seemed to have recovered his energy. Tomoya retorted that he had never witnessed chaos like this at Comic-Con, even though it had 10 times the number of attendees. He reflected that the key was to see everyone as part of the same Otaku tribe or fellow hoarders of cherished collectibles. Tomoya then asked Megumi which stores she wanted to visit and began marking them on the mall map. Megumi asked if he was sure he could handle it if she named all of them. Undeterred, Tomoya started mapping out and connecting their shopping route. As Tomoya meticulously planned their itinerary to make things easier, Megumi told him there was no need to overthink it. They could just wander and visit stores as they came across them. But Tomoya refused to let this shopping trip devolve into an aimless battle. With determination, he declared that they would win this game by sticking to his carefully plotted route. They successfully made their first purchase at the initial store on the list. However, Tomoya decided to change their route when he learned that the next store had a 2-hour wait time. Megumi thought this meant they would skip that store altogether, but Tomoya assured her it was too soon to give up. He explained that the current congestion was likely due to limited edition items only available that day. Once those items sold out, the crowd would probably thin out. Megumi couldn't believe how much thought Tomoya put into what seemed like an ordinary shopping trip. Tomoya explained that the frustration of not being able to buy something you've been eagerly anticipating is the same, whether you're an otaku or just a regular person. Megumi nodded in agreement. They continued to the next store. Although Tomoya was visibly tired, he kept cheering Megumi on. As the day wore on, the mall grew even more crowded, making their progress more challenging. Still, Tomoya encouraged her, saying that their timing would work out if they kept moving forward. At one point, Megumi accidentally bumped into someone and nearly fell. Thankfully, Tomoya quickly grabbed her arm, steadying her. He told her firmly not to let go of him. Battling through the dense crowd, Tomoya held on to Megumi as they made their way forward. Finally, they reached the last store on their list. Both of them felt a wave of relief and joy. Megumi was amazed that they managed to finish everything in just one day. She thanked Tomoya for all his effort. However, Tomoya brushed off her gratitude, saying that the exhaustion he'd felt in the past was far worse than this. Megumi suggested that Tomoya take a break, noticing how drained he looked. While browsing in the store, Tomoya spotted Megumi at a counter examining glasses. To his surprise, Megumi was picking out a pair for him. She carefully chose one and placed it on Tomoya's face, saying it was a gift to thank him for accompanying her today. Tomoya was stunned. For a moment, it was as if he were seeing Megumi in the 2D version of his dreams. He thanked her sincerely but also apologized, explaining that he couldn't walk her home because he had another place he needed to go. At the release celebration for Koizuru Metronome Volume 2, a fan signing event featuring Utaha was held. Tomoya, a devoted fan of Koizuru Metronome, attended the event. Despite having read the first volume over 20 times, he still found himself moved to tears each time. Tomoya shared that when Naoto tried to win Seiyuka's heart in Chapter 6, it was deeply touching, but the misunderstandings they faced later became frustrating. He also admitted that at first he struggled to understand Seiyuka's character and thought process. However, by the 5th read-through, he started to suspect the story might be based on Utaha's own experiences. Each subsequent reading brought new understanding. While he humbly confessed he might not be the best reader, he emphasized how profound the story of Koizuru Metronome felt to him. Utaha then asked if Tomoya was a student at Toyamasaki High School and instructed him to call her senpai. Later, Tomoya tried calling Utaha, but she didn't pick up. Sonoko, noticing the incessant ringing, asked why Utaha wasn't answering her phone. Utaha casually responded that she didn't need to answer it. Tomoya, realizing she was probably upset with him, hurriedly ran to a cafe. Sonoko then asked Utaha if the caller was Tomoya. Utaha questioned why Sonoko would think that, especially since she had mentioned him all day. Sonoko pointed out that Utaha had been avoiding the topic all day, which only made it more obvious that Tomoya was on her mind. Utaha firmly denied it, stating she wasn't thinking about him, had no interest in him, and didn't even want to talk to him. In a prior encounter at a cafe, Tomoya had woken Utaha, who had dozed off at the table, and asked if she found him boring. Utaha explained she had been working overtime because of looming deadlines, including the plot for her 4th book. Tomoya used the opportunity to bring up the cliffhanger ending in the 3rd volume, calling it cruel. His excitement in discussing her books, however, seemed excessive to Utaha, who told him there was no need to get worked up over minor details in her novels. Tomoya argued that what might seem trivial to her held immense significance to the characters and readers eagerly awaiting the next installment. Utaha asked Tomoya what kind of story he wanted to see next. Surprised, Tomoya questioned if she was serious about asking him for input. Utaha clarified that it wasn't unusual for an author to seek feedback and ideas from readers, just for inspiration, of course. Tomoya eagerly dove into his thoughts, passionately sharing his perspective on the light novel's plot. Utaha quietly smiled, watching him as he poured his heart into giving her feedback. Back at the cafe, Tomoya was greeted by a waitress who asked if he was alone. He admitted he had planned to meet someone, but it seemed they weren't coming. Meanwhile, Sonoko, relieved that her work was done for the day, decided to return to her hotel to drink beer and sleep. Before leaving, she advised Utaha to call Tomoya if she felt bothered. Utaha denied being bothered, insisting she was busy and saw no need to greet him. Sonoko reminded Utaha of the things she wanted to say to Tomoya and urged her to stop being so stubborn and face him. Teasingly, Sonoko asked if Utaha's attitude was the reason she still didn't have a boyfriend. As heavy rain began to fall, Sonoko went off to buy an umbrella. Left alone, Utaha admitted to herself that she never really understood someone like Tomoya. At that time, Utaha offered Tomoya the chance to read the draft for the ending of her book, but Tomoya refused. Utaha asked him why he didn't want to read it when he usually jumped at the opportunity to see her drafts first. Tomoya countered by asking why she wanted to show it exclusively to him, especially since it was her final book. Utaha revealed that she wanted to know if the ending met his expectations, whether it aligned with his hopes for the protagonist's decision and the heroine's future. She admitted that Tomoya's response could influence how she finalized the story. Tomoya asked why Utaha didn't have confidence in her own work, but Utaha insisted that she wanted to hear his thoughts and feelings about it. Tomoya, however, responded that what he truly wanted was to see Utaha's decision, not an ending tailored to his preferences. Utaha asked him once more if he would read the manuscript, but Tomoya firmly said he couldn't, as he didn't have the right to do so. Still unsatisfied, Utaha pressed for an explanation. Tomoya finally shouted that he was her biggest fan, and that alone was his reason. It was as simple as that. Months later, Tomoya was still waiting for Utaha to forgive him. 6 months had passed, and he wasn't sure when, or if, that day would come. The last train to Ikebukuro had arrived, but Tomoya suddenly decided not to board after hearing someone bid him goodbye. The voice sounded just like Utaha's farewell 6 months ago when he had escorted her home. Meanwhile, Utaha was sitting in a cafe with Sonoko, though she wasn't really paying attention to their conversation. Her gaze was fixed on the rain outside the window, where she suddenly spotted Tomoya, drenched and gasping for breath. Utaha told him to take a shower in her hotel room. Sonoko asked what Utaha planned to do. Should they kick him out once his clothes dried? Utaha was surprised at Sonoko's bluntness. Sonoko pointed out that Utaha herself had said this wasn't her fault, but Utaha argued that didn't mean she could just send him away, especially since the last train had already departed. Ultimately, Sonoko left the decision up to Utaha, reminding her that the room was now set up for 2 people after they had adjusted their booking earlier at the reception. Sonoko then headed to her room, telling Utaha to meet her in the lobby at 8 a.m. the next morning. Before leaving, she added that whatever Utaha decided to do that night and beyond was none of her business. Utaha called out to her, but Sonoko simply gave her a thumbs up and walked away. Left alone, Utaha suddenly felt nervous, unsure of what to do next. Tomoya, who had fallen asleep on a chair, woke up to the sound of water running in the bathroom. Utaha emerged moments later, dressed in a towel after her shower. Tomoya, still in his wet clothes, blushed and thanked her for letting him use the bathroom. He quickly grabbed his change of clothes and said he'd leave right away. But before he could exit the room, Utaha called out to him, asking him to sit on the bed. She then questioned why Tomoya had come all the way to Gashi. Tomoya explained that he couldn't reach her by phone, so he had boldly called her house to find out where she had gone. He mentioned that Utaha's mother must have been worried about her high school-aged daughter, but Utaha corrected him. Her mother trusted her because she was a top student, never caused trouble, and never disobeyed her parents. That said, she also didn't have many friends, which was why her mother would probably faint if she saw Utaha in her current situation with Tomoya. Tomoya asked if Utaha was staying at the hotel to gather material for her next book. She confirmed this, saying she was also taking the opportunity to visit local shops. Tomoya found her dedication incredible, marveling at how much work went into her writing, even before the book was published. He added that it was even more impressive since this one might get adapted into an anime. Utaha asked Tomoya to stop talking about the topic for now. She then asked if he had really come all the way to see her even though the last train had already left. Tomoya admitted it, and Utaha called him a complete fool before resting her head on his shoulder. This made Tomoya nervous, and he suddenly made a bold request to make him a real man. He got down on his knees and pleaded, but quickly clarified that he wasn't being inappropriate. All he wanted was to become a true creator. Utaha, annoyed, stepped on him and asked if he deliberately created this misunderstanding. They began discussing the plot Utaha had written for their project. She asked if Tomoya had noticed any flaws in it. Tomoya started recounting his day, explaining that he had gone to Rokutenba Mall with Megumi. Utaha immediately asked if it was a date, but Tomoya dismissed the idea, saying it was just for gathering material. Utaha kept staring at him intently, prompting Tomoya to ask her to let him finish his story. He explained that the mall was packed with a chaotic crowd and he had started feeling unwell just before they went inside. But instead of getting upset, Megumi showed genuine concern for him, just like any decent person would. She even waited for him to recover before they continued. After that, they explored the shops together, and she went along with all of his odd ideas, turning their time together into something fun. She even gave him a gift to thank him, but then Tomoya had left her behind to come see Utaha. Despite this, Megumi had smiled as she watched him leave. Utaha asked if Megumi might have been a little annoyed deep down. Tomoya confidently said no because Megumi was genuinely kind. Utaha sighed and asked what she was supposed to do after hearing him shower Megumi with praise. Tomoya said that's why Utaha's story needed revisions. He had even marked the spots that needed changes. He acknowledged that her plot was incredibly compelling, with a grand scale that felt like a masterpiece, but he argued that it needed adjustments. Utaha pointed out that they were supposed to be even now, so why bother revising it? Tomoya explained that his earlier perspective had changed. If left as is, the main heroine, Meguri, wouldn't be happy. Utaha disagreed, stating that Meguri had accepted her destined path before her reincarnation and had always remained loyal to her beloved older brother. She asked why Tomoya thought she wasn't happy. Tomoya challenged her, questioning if that was really the kind of happiness Meguri would have wanted. He argued that searching for past memories to save her previous life wasn't necessarily the future Meguri desired. Moreover, would the players enjoy seeing Meguri discard the joyful memories she had created up until now? Utaha yelled, asking if it was so wrong to be trapped in the past. Tomoya calmly replied that it wasn't wrong, it was just one option. On one hand, he liked that idea, but on the other, he loved the simplicity of being with Megumi, a normal girl with no extraordinary connection to him. He believed players would enjoy Meguri's character in the game and her daily life, which was already fulfilling. That's why he wanted her to abandon her fate and return to a normal life. He envisioned a route that focused on classic romance rather than the burdens of her past destiny. Utaha asked if such a route would truly be more interesting. Tomoya confidently said yes, believing that Utaha could develop something even more captivating. He wanted more time to grow closer to Meguri, to have their friends get sick of seeing them together, to go on dates, exchange meaningful looks, kiss. And since it was an all-ages game, leave it at that. Utaha then asked Tomoya if he thought they should just forget the story they had built so far, saying it would be pointless to remain shackled to the past. Tomoya replied that the past still held value. The idea of a love buried for 100 years was incredibly moe, especially since Meguri was a yandere. He added that the thought of them both cherishing their shared memories sounded perfect, abandoning everything else to live in a world that meant so much to them. However, he reminded Utaha that the story had to remain all ages, so it could only go as far as a kiss. Utaha called Tomoya indecisive. Tomoya chuckled, saying that's the charm of a true dating sim game protagonist. Utaha sighed but began revising the story, asking for feedback on some sample lines she had written. Tomoya suggested making them even more unique. Utaha admitted it was the first time in her career she'd received such feedback. Tomoya explained that if Utaha made the character as plain as possible, players would be caught off guard when a drastic change occurred and the character suddenly became sweet. Utaha understood the appeal of a gap moe. Tomoya continued, explaining that the character could return to being plain after the sweet moment, leaving players feeling as if there was no sweetness at all. Utaha called such a character ridiculous, but Tomoya insisted that people like that really exist in real life. Utaha, however, was reluctant to admit that a main heroine could have such a personality. The two continued discussing until 5 a.m. As the hours dragged on. Utaha began to type furiously, her frustration seeping into her work. She even shouted while typing, leading Tomoya to wonder if she had been possessed by a yandere little sister. Utaha kept yelling, swept up in the intensity of the story she was crafting. Tomoya tried to calm her down, but she snapped at him, asking if it was so wrong for a writer to fall in love with their own work. Didn't writers pour their hearts into their stories for the sake of their fans? Tomoya replied that it wasn't wrong, but those words should come from the main character, not the writer. By morning, Utaha was preparing to leave. She woke Tomoya and cheerfully said good morning, then mentioned that she had a full day of work ahead. Tomoya sympathized, saying it must be tough being Utaha. She replied that as long as she was doing what she loved, no amount of effort would feel burdensome. She teased Tomoya, saying he still looked exhausted from their passionate night. The ambiguity of her words made Tomoya flustered, and he yelled that she probably meant their intense brainstorming session. Utaha reminded him to check out of the hotel before 10 a.m. and that all he had to do was return the key. She then remarked how much she had enjoyed what they did last night. Tomoya begged her to stop with the teasing, but Utaha confessed that working on something together with him had been truly enjoyable. She had confirmed it for herself the night before and officially welcomed him as a creator. She was confident in his abilities, saying he had the passion to bring his ideas to life and the creativity to back it up, all of which was evident in his expressions. She reminisced about how a year ago she had poured her blood, sweat, and tears into her writing, all for the sake of winning over stubborn, difficult, and demanding fans. She had revised her work repeatedly and faced numerous challenges during the editing process, but even in the toughest moments, her heart had never wavered, and she had finally completed her story. That was the experience she wanted to share with Tomoya. She invited him to pour their blood, sweat, and tears into their work together from now on. Tomoya smiled at her words. After leaving the room, Utaha sent him a photo she had taken of him while he was asleep. Tomoya was startled and let out a loud yell in surprise. Today, Tomoya went to Airiri's house because she had asked him to. Curious about her reason, Tomoya questioned why she had called him over. It turned out Airiri was genuinely in trouble. Tomoya teased her about speaking with an English accent, despite her English grades being worse than his. Airiri revealed that she was running out of time to finish the script for the upcoming summer comic market. Tomoya had a feeling that was the issue and criticized her for getting into such a predicament. However, Airiri blamed him for dragging her into a chaotic situation that delayed her progress. Understanding her frustration, Tomoya promised to take responsibility for it. His declaration left Airiri stunned, and she asked what he planned to do about it, whether he'd handle the preparations, post an announcement on their website, or negotiate with a local printing company. Instead, Airiri asked Tomoya to review her storyboard and brainstorm ideas for the plot and setting. Tomoya hesitated, claiming he wasn't experienced with doujin works. Airiri insisted that there was no other choice but to rely on an anime fanatic like him. She compared him to a broken arrow or sinking reeds, which are Tomoya, who still hadn't agreed to help. Airiri then reassured him, saying that as soon as the script was finished, she would jump straight into designing the game's characters. Frustrated, she ordered him to shut up and assist her, to which Tomoya sarcastically replied that it would be hard to help if he kept quiet. When Tomoya asked for her basis for the story, Airiri cited Ano Yukino Prism. Tomoya, a fan of the anime, admitted he had watched it through to the end and considered it the best show of the spring season. Airiri, who learned about it from Tomoya's blog, used this as leverage to secure his help. Tomoya begrudgingly agreed, though he remarked that he might not be able to refuse her request anyway. When Tomoya asked about her vision for the story, he suggested an emotional epilogue between Kohai, the protagonist, and Mui, the main heroine. But Airiri declared that her idea centered around an intimate ending involving Kohai and Mariko, the childhood friend. Airiri, an avid Mariko fan, found Mui too perfect and doll-like, and she felt that Yue's storyline was overly forced. Tomoya disagreed, arguing that Airiri was missing his point. He criticized her for incorporating explicit content just to sell the doujin, but Airiri defended the choice, claiming it wouldn't sell otherwise. Tomoya was shocked to learn that Airiri's parents supported her work and even participated in creating similar content, making it clear that her doujinshi pursuits were a family tradition. Airiri dismissed his concerns, emphasizing that doujinshi should no longer be looked down upon. To help with the story, Airiri asked Tomoya to embody Kohai, the protagonist, and rehearse a romantic confession to Mariko. The two began acting out the script, and as they followed the dialogue, Tomoya suddenly questioned why Airiri had changed into an outfit resembling Mariko's. Airiri clarified she was simply getting into character and told him to stop overthinking it. Tomoya begrudgingly resumed, but Airiri insisted he continue with more enthusiasm. The situation grew more awkward when Airiri, in character as Mariko, delivered a bold line asking Kohai to ruin her and make her feel unforgettable. Tomoya froze, his gaze unintentionally lingering on her. Overwhelmed, he abruptly stood up and backed away, prompting Airiri to urge him not to stop mid-rehearsal. Despite the awkwardness, they eventually managed to finish the scene. The next day at school, Tomoya approached Megumi to have a conversation with her. Utaha, who was nearby, overheard their discussion. Tomoya wanted to address something important with Megumi, and he bluntly told her that she didn't understand anything about character building. He explained that traits like personality, manner of speaking, birth dates, women's sizes, favorite armored vehicles, or swimming preferences were the essence of a character. If Megumi didn't stick to these details, the Megumi loved by readers might die in their eyes. Tomoya then asked why Megumi had changed her hairstyle. Megumi nonchalantly replied that she did it simply because she felt like it. Tomoya, exasperated, asked if she was willing to risk the destruction of her character. Megumi countered, suggesting that a heroine suddenly changing her hairstyle like in manga might stir people's hearts. However, Tomoya argued that she wasn't like that. Normally, people would notice, but not in her case. Megumi then jokingly speculated that the perfect moment to change hairstyles might be during a closing ceremony, or better yet, during an opening one. Tomoya dismissed the idea, warning that relying on quirks wouldn't make her the #1 main heroine. Amused, Megumi teased Tomoya, saying he must care a lot about girls if he was so critical about their hairstyles. Meanwhile, Eriri found herself surrounded by her friends who were asking where she had spent her vacation. Feeling cornered, Eriri tried to think of a way to escape the situation. She casually mentioned that she might have gone to her father's villa in Nasu. Her friends, curious, asked if her father's villa was like a castle or something similar. Eriri admitted she hadn't even been there herself. As Eriri pondered her escape, she noticed Tomoya walking by, still lecturing Megumi about characters. Megumi asked Tomoya if being a character was like having blonde, twin tails, or long black hair. Tomoya explained that a hairstyle should match the character. Megumi pressed further, asking if it was like being a tsundere childhood friend or a stern senpai. Tomoya suggested other examples like a younger Kuhai Jr. Still curious, Megumi asked if he meant an actual younger sister or a metaphorical one. Tomoya clarified that if having a real younger sister was too controversial, it should be avoided. Megumi remarked that she hadn't realized there were so many variations. Tomoya urged Megumi to imagine a younger girl who calls her senpai, clings to her constantly, respects her, and always wants to be with her. That's what he considered moe. Megumi, however, still didn't see what was moe about it. Tomoya elaborated, saying it would be even better if the Kuhai waited by the school gate for her senpai to go home together. Suddenly, a girl called out to Tomoya, addressing him as senpai. Instantly, Tomoya turned his attention to the girl, pointing out that this was exactly what he meant. Megumi, Eriri, and Utaha all turned their gazes toward the girl as well. The girl excitedly ran toward Tomoya, confirming that she had found the right person. Overjoyed, she hugged him tightly, declaring that she had come back just for him. She hugged him again, exclaiming how much she had missed him. The girl was none other than Hashima Izumi, a third-year middle school student from Hanoda. Tomoya hesitated, still unsure if she was really Izumi. She jokingly asked if Tomoya had forgotten her. Utaha turned to Eriri, asking if Izumi was one of Tomoya's juniors. Eriri admitted she didn't know anything about her because they had attended different grade schools and Izumi was 2 years younger. Besides, Izumi had moved to Nagoya before middle school. Utaha didn't buy Eriri's explanation and expressed her doubt. Eriri insisted that she had never even spoken to Izumi. All she knew was that Izumi used to follow Tomoya around all the time. Utaha remarked that if Izumi was 2 years younger than Tomoya, then she was still in middle school. However, judging by Izumi's fuller chest, it seemed more like Eriri was the one who looked like a middle schooler. Izumi then asked Tomoya if she looked like a different person now. Tomoya admitted she did. He explained that she used to have very short hair and tan skin. Izumi smiled and asked if she looked more feminine now, attributing it to Tomoya teaching her the meaning of being a woman. Her words were ambiguous, leaving everyone stunned. Megumi, curious, asked Tomoya if he hadn't seen Izumi in the 3 years since elementary school. Tomoya quickly tried to explain so Megumi wouldn't misunderstand him, but he was cut off when Izumi handed him a brochure. She told him she would be at the second day of Comic Market at East Hall 29 Bits under the circle name Fancy Wave and invited him to visit her there. It turned out Izumi had also ventured into the doujin world, working on a book titled Little Love Rhapsody. She mentioned that last year was her first time participating in such an event, so she was still a beginner. Megumi, unfamiliar with the title, asked if Little Whatever was a gal game. Tomoya and Izumi were shocked by her ignorance. Izumi corrected her, explaining that it wasn't Little Whatever but Love Little Rhapsody, also known as Litrap or LR. She proudly added that it was a popular 3-volume series that had sold over 2 million copies. Frustrated, she yelled at Megumi not to get it wrong again. Megumi then asked if Izumi was Tomoya's favorite junior. Izumi explained that before she met Tomoya, she had never seen a single game or anime. Tomoya had taken a clueless little girl like her and introduced her to a whole new world. He even gifted her Litrap 2 on her birthday. If he hadn't done that, she claimed she wouldn't have found happiness in life. Because of this, she wanted to repay her debt to Tomoya. Megumi, listening to this, finally understood what Tomoya meant by a junior little sister type of personality. Tomoya couldn't deny it and reluctantly admitted that was exactly the case. Wutaha chimed in, accusing Tomoya of corrupting an innocent elementary school girl with his Otome games. She teased him, saying she now fully understood that Tomoya had always been a womanizer. Ariri muttered Litterhap, catching Wutaha's attention. Wutaha asked what was wrong, but Ariri dismissed it as nothing. Wutaha, not convinced, asked if Ariri wasn't feeling well and offered to accompany her if she needed to go somewhere. Ariri, however, felt like Wutaha was just trying to get rid of her. Before they parted ways, Izumi reminded Tomoya to come to her summer comic market event. Tomoya promised he would attend, saying he wanted to see Izumi's work. Izumi then cheerfully bid farewell to Tomoya, Megumi, and Ariri. Megumi was surprised that Izumi seemed to know Ariri. Izumi explained that Ariri was a well-known figure around her old school. She also invited Tomoya to visit her new house sometime, adding that she was sure her older brother would be happy to see Tomoya again. Tomoya noticed that Ariri had been in a bad mood the entire time. It turned out she was upset about Litterhap and the fact that Tomoya had introduced it to Izumi. Tomoya defended himself, calling it a masterpiece. Suddenly, Hashime Iori appeared in front of them. Iori was Izumi's older brother. However, both Tomoya and Ariri ignored his presence, too caught up in their argument. They continued to bicker as they walked past Iori. Tomoya argued that he wanted to create great works that everyone could enjoy, saying it was part of his otaku instincts. Ariri retorted that such instincts were what dragged others into pointless trends. Tomoya countered, saying that if someone was truly important, it was natural to discuss such topics. However, Ariri dismissed Tomoya's opinion as nothing more than worthless drivel. As they kept arguing, they passed Iori, who was still standing there. Iori was convinced they had noticed him standing there the whole time. Frustrated, Iori finally called out, asking them not to ignore him since he had been waiting for over half an hour. Tomoya asked Lori what he wanted from him. Lori explained that thanks to his father's job, he could finally return to Tokyo after 3 years, and just wanted to drop by to say hello. Tomoya replied that Lori didn't need to travel all the way there and could have stayed in Nagoya, enjoying the local cuisine people raved about. Lori pointed out that the famous jumbo fried shrimp in Nagoya was made with imported black tiger shrimp, which meant it wasn't even authentic Nagoya cuisine. Tomoya countered, saying that it was no different from the salted pollock roe from Hakata, which didn't use roe made in Kyushu. Ariri sighed, wondering how the two of them managed to turn everything into an argument. Ignoring her, Tomoya asked why Lori had shown up in front of him again. If he remembered correctly, Tomoya had already cut ties with Lori. Lori accused Tomoya of being heartless, reminding him that they used to be best friends who agreed to rise together in the world of otaku culture. Tomoya recalled those days, admitting that back then he was shocked to discover Lori, the most handsome boy in their class, someone Tomoya thought he'd never even be able to speak to, was actually an even bigger otaku than himself. But Lori had once said that Tomoya was the only one who truly understood him. Ariri interrupted, sarcastically pointing out how many girls in their class used to gossip about Tomoya and Lori's odd behavior. Tomoya continued, explaining that Lori was fundamentally different from him. Lori didn't become an otaku to share the things he loved. Instead, he focused on chasing after popular works and creators to benefit himself. From the beginning, Lori had openly declared that his goal was to climb the ranks of the otaku world. Tomoya advised him to build his success from the ground up rather than leeching off the work of others. At this, Ariri mockingly told Tomoya to take a look in the mirror. Tomoya ignored her, insisting that Lori's approach was wrong. He added that Lori probably knew deep down that what he was doing was dishonest, which was why he couldn't bring himself to show his true self to Izumi, his younger sister. Lori hesitated but admitted that might be true. However, he revealed that he was now part of the Doujin Circle Rouge and Rouge, which was led by Kusaka Akane. Tomoya, stunned, asked if Akane was the legendary creator who hadn't appeared in public for over a decade. Lori confirmed it and explained that he had done whatever it took to be accepted into the circle. He was proud, saying that the methods Tomoya so harshly criticized had worked out well for him. With that, Lori handed Tomoya his business card and said he looked forward to working with him. Ariri scoffed, dismissing the card, saying she didn't need one from a greedy thug like Lori, who exploited the Doujin scene. Lori, ignoring her insult, addressed Ariri directly and revealed that his circle was highly interested in her. Tomoya was shocked to learn that Lori already knew Ariri's secret identity as a Doujin artist. But that wasn't all. Lori and his circle also knew that Tomoya was working on a game project with Ariri and Wutaha. He went so far as to call Tomoya the producer behind the grand design that was creating a buzz in the industry. Tomoya denied the claim, insisting he wasn't trying to break into the industry. Lori then revealed that his circle was coincidentally working on a project with the exact same concept. They were already hiring animators for it, and Lori declared that the two groups were now rivals. With a smug smile, Lori provocatively asked whether Tomoya's fledgling circle deserved someone as talented as Ariri, or if she would shine brighter with Rouge and Rouge. Ariri recalled moments spent with Tomoya from when they were kids. They had been very close since childhood, both sharing a deep love for animation. Their closeness, however, often attracted the disapproval of those around them. This morning, Ariri stared at the bright blue sky, grumbling about the scorching heat. Today, Tomoya was helping Ariri finish her comic for the upcoming summer comic market. Megumi arrived with a variety of snacks. Seeing how busy they were, she asked if today wasn't supposed to be a character design briefing. Tomoya responded, mentioning the main heroine Megumi was modeling. Looking at the animated drawing they were working on, Megumi noted that it seemed overly suggestive and asked if she had ever been informed about needing to undress for this. Tomoya clarified that the current project had nothing to do with their game. It was a script for Ariri's circle for the summer comic market. Ariri apologized to Megumi, explaining that she was racing against a deadline. Understanding their predicament, Megumi asked when the summer comic market was taking place. Tomoya said the event would start tomorrow. Shocked, Megumi pointed out that they were only just printing it now. Ariri reassured her, saying the comic market was a 3-day event and her circle was set for the 3rd day, so there was no need to worry. Megumi, unconvinced, asked if Ariri was sure that wouldn't be a problem. Tomoya shouted that of course it was a problem. He mentioned how it would be bad enough if only the printing costs increased, but if they had to sneak into the printing shop during the Obon holiday, things would get truly dire. Despite Tomoya helping with the storyboard, he complained about why Ariri was still pulling 11-hour shifts. Ariri simply replied that as a creator, she had no excuse not to finish everything. Megumi called her cool for her dedication, though Tomoya disagreed. Megumi remarked that regardless, the summer comic market would arrive soon enough. Tomoya told Megumi that this particular comic market was just the beginning of a battle, with their real challenge being the winter comic market later in the year. He claimed this was the start of a legend, a debut for the greatest Gal game production ever, one that would revolutionize the doujin world. Megumi then asked if Ariri would be attending the summer comic market since she was the one selling her books there. Ariri said she wasn't going and planned to have her parents take care of it. Megumi commented that Ariri's parents were very understanding. In turn, Ariri asked if Megumi planned to attend, warning her that stepping into such a battlefield, where otakus from around the world gathered, would surely lead to regrets. Megumi replied that she had already received tickets from Izumi and thought it would be good practice for the year-end event. She added that she couldn't wait to see Izumi's doujinshi. Tomoya enthusiastically said that with Megumi's excitement, he was sure the book would be a hit among LiterHap enthusiasts. Megumi didn't press for more details but hoped the book wouldn't turn out like what Ariri was currently working on. Tomoya reassured her, saying there was no need to worry. LiterHap books likely wouldn't feature nude girls even for adult audiences. Megumi asked what exactly made them adult and whether they were safe to view. Tomoya was keeping Megumi company as she prepared to play a LiterHap game. He asked if she was really sure about playing it. Megumi was curious because Izumi had mentioned how fun the game was. However, Izumi had been talking about LiterHap 3, while the version Megumi was about to play was the first installment. Since Tomoya didn't have the 3rd game, Megumi decided that starting with the first one would be enough to satisfy her curiosity. Plus, she reasoned, isn't it better to begin with the first in a series anyway? Tomoya was thrilled, happy that Megumi was finally choosing to play an Otome game of her own free will. He even got a little emotional, saying how fast Megumi was growing into a proper otaku. When Megumi started the game and entered her real name, Tomoya was stunned. He found it absurd, pointing out that even someone like him wouldn't dare do something so embarrassing. Megumi simply told him to get back to work and not bother her while she was playing. Ariri, meanwhile, was watching Megumi play from the side. Tomoya reminded Ariri that she should be focusing on her work. Ariri insisted that she was just taking a short break and grumbled about Tomoya making a fuss over something so minor, which was annoying her. Tomoya, exasperated, reminded her that he was the one forced to help her with her work for unreasonable reasons, and yet she called him annoying. Apologizing sarcastically, he dropped the matter. While Megumi was choosing a character, Tomoya explained that she needed to pick someone who could stay with her. He added that each character would trigger specific events only in the first month of gameplay, so she should choose carefully. Megumi told him not to worry, as she had already read the game's manual. She hesitated between Errol Onishama, Prince G's, and Symphone-sama, but ultimately chose her childhood friend, Service. Ariri was shocked by Megumi's choice. Though she didn't outright forbid it, she warned that Service route was notoriously difficult, with hidden event triggers, and was designed for advanced players. Tomoya pointed out that Ariri herself was a fan of Service. When the game began, Megumi asked Tomoya how she should respond to Service's confession of love. Tomoya was baffled that she would even ask him such a thing. Megumi explained that Service seemed so serious about his feelings that she didn't know what to say. Tomoya informed her that in Gal games and Otome games, accepting a love confession typically ends the story. From that point, the player begins a happily ever after relationship and cheating or switching love interests becomes impossible. Megumi, however, objected, saying, "But we're still in high school." Tomoya scolded her for dragging real-world logic into the game. Just as Megumi was about to ask Ariri for advice, she noticed that Ariri had started crying. Worried, Megumi apologized for disturbing her work. Tomoya checked on Ariri's drawings and praised her for her consistency as a doujinshi artist. Ariri retorted that she would be insulted if her work quality declined just because of a deadline crunch. Tomoya then asked why Ariri didn't take her skills to the professional level. Ariri admitted that representatives from various industry publishers had visited her circle's stand before, but since she didn't attend the events herself, she'd never spoken to them directly. She added that Eri had mentioned her circle's work caught their interest. Tomoya brought up the offer from Rouge and asked if Ariri had considered it. Ariri admitted that the offer was tempting. As a Shutter Circle, their sales potential would skyrocket, practically guaranteeing success. Tomoya then asked her whether she saw drawing as just a hobby or if she aspired to achieve something bigger. He assured her that if she wanted to accept the offer, he wouldn't stop her. Before Ariri could respond, she declared that she had finished her drawing and thanks to watching Megumi play, was itching to play a game herself. Ariri started her game, confidently stating that she remembered all the event triggers. Tomoya praised her skills, calling her impressive at this game. Ariri admitted she hadn't played it in 8 years, then asked if Tomoya remembered the game. Tomoya replied that it was originally Ariri's game, but she pointed out that he borrowed it and never returned it. Tomoya made an excuse, saying he hadn't had time to return it. Ariri then informed Tomoya that from now on, she was part of his circle and wouldn't attend any events until the winter comic market. She added that she had no intention of being a guest artist for anyone else. Tomoya smiled, realizing this meant she had turned down Iori's offer. Ariri mentioned that if she had let her emotions take over, Iori would have pursued her relentlessly. She noted that Iori was simply money-hungry and discarded creators once he was done with them. Tomoya admitted he hadn't expected Iori to be that way. Ariri then teased Tomoya, asking if he liked Iori through the eyes of a Fujoshi. Tomoya got annoyed and snapped that he didn't need to hear about such things. Ariri burst out laughing at his irritated expression. Megumi arrived with dinner, remarking that Ariri and Tomoya seemed to be in a cheerful mood. Ariri, however, was surprised that Megumi was casually cooking dinner at a guy's house as if it were no big deal. That day, Tomoya and Megumi visited Comic Market at Izumi's invitation. Tomoya was bursting with excitement, urging Megumi to hurry as registration for Circles was about to close. They climbed what Tomoya referred to as the legendary stairs, a staircase that made anyone want to shout, "Everyone is trash." From the top, they could see a sea of people lined up to enter the event. Tomoya smugly mentioned that unlike those people, they didn't have to wait in line because they were among the elite, granted special circle tickets by the event organizers. This, he joked, made it fair to treat others like trash. Megumi, however, warned him not to act that way. When they arrived at Izumi's booth, Izumi was overwhelmed with emotion upon seeing them. She immediately hugged Tomoya tightly, clinging to him with enthusiasm. Tomoya was shocked, particularly by the sensation of Izumi's chest pressing against him. Megumi, feeling uncomfortable, pointed out that she was also there. Izumi, seemingly oblivious, called Megumi Tomoya's girlfriend and thanked her before bursting into tears again and hugging Tomoya once more. Annoyed, Megumi told Izumi to let go and called her a stray cat. However, Tomoya noted that Megumi's tone was too flat to sound genuinely angry. Afterward, Tomoya and Megumi helped Izumi prepare her booth. Once they finished, Izumi expressed her gratitude. Megumi looked around and asked if that was all the preparation she needed to do. Izumi confirmed, saying all that was left was waiting for the hall to open. Curious, Megumi asked why other booths nearby seemed so busy. Tomoya explained that those circles were top tier, selling thousands of copies and raking in millions or even tens of millions of yen during peak days. Because of their success, they attracted significant attention, even from the National Tax Agency. Izumi chimed in, saying that compared to those circles, she was thrilled to sell even half of 100 copies. Her circle, Fancy Wave, always operated in the red. Feeling guilty, Megumi apologized for her earlier question. Tomoya reassured her, noting that over 90% of the circles participating in Comic Market were in similar situations. Izumi added that selling doujinshi in person carried a deeper meaning than simply selling them online. She explained that the event brought together people who shared similar interests, allowing them to showcase their work, bond over their passions, and enjoy meaningful conversations. Megumi, now understanding, remarked that the people here were like Tomoya and Izumi. Tomoya, offended, asked why Megumi looked so disgusted when she said that. Izumi explained that Comic Market was filled with doujinshi, fueled by dreams and camaraderie. She admitted that even though she had only been active in the doujinshi world for a year, she had already gained incredible experiences and memories. Tomoya opened one of Izumi's comics, immediately intrigued by its content. Izumi told him that even if her book didn't sell out, even if she couldn't visit other circles to buy their books because she had to guard her own booth alone, and even if she had to lug around a heavy suitcase full of unsold books, she was sure she wouldn't cry. Megumi reassured Izumi, saying she didn't need to hold back from buying other books today, since both she and Tomoya were there to help. Izumi thanked Megumi, once again calling her Tomoya's girlfriend. Megumi asked Izumi to just call her by her name instead. After flipping through the comic, Tomoya asked Izumi how long she had been creating doujinshi. Izumi replied that it had only been a year. Before that, she was just a reader and buyer. Tomoya, surprised, told her he would make sure all her books sold. As Comic Market officially opened, Tomoya hurried off somewhere. Izumi, noticing Megumi engrossed in one of her comics, asked where Tomoya had gone. Megumi calmly assured her that he would be back soon. It turned out Tomoya had gone to print a large poster featuring a page from Izumi's comic. Izumi asked Megumi if she wasn't worried about Tomoya's sudden disappearance, but Megumi said that in reality, she was the one who was being ignored by Tomoya. She understood that right now Tomoya was focused on helping Izumi. Izumi was surprised by Megumi's awareness and trust in Tomoya, but Megumi explained that it wasn't about trust. She just knew because she didn't trust him at all. Tomoya returned carrying a board and quickly started setting it up at Izumi's booth. Izumi turned to Megumi, asking if she really was Tomoya's girlfriend. Megumi replied that she was Tomoya's main heroine. This left Izumi confused, though Megumi admitted she didn't fully understand it herself either. Suddenly, Tomoya apologized for taking so long and asked how many books had sold so far. Megumi told him about 30, which meant there were still 70 left. Without hesitation, Tomoya mounted the poster on the board and put it on display. Izumi was shocked by what he was doing, asking why he had printed such a large poster. She felt embarrassed, especially since the page feature wasn't finished. Tomoya dismissed her concerns, stating that it was a lie to say she didn't care about sales. He was convinced that Izumi wanted as many people as possible to read her work. That's why she made doujinshi in the first place. Izumi panicked, asking why he had to use that page for the poster. She worried it would make her a laughingstock since the page wasn't complete. Tomoya guessed that she hadn't inked it yet. Izumi admitted she had come up with a new storyline just a day before the final deadline. She got erased her finished drawings to create something new, but with only a day to work, she couldn't finish inking it. Izumi pleaded with Tomoya to take the poster down, but he refused. She called him cruel, but Megumi countered, saying Tomoya wasn't being mean at all. The scene he chose to feature was genuinely captivating from that point onward. A man approached the booth and began flipping through the comic. Izumi, thinking her work might not appeal to him, started to discourage him. But Tomoya stopped her, insisting they let him take a look. To Izumi's surprise, the man bought the book. Izumi was overwhelmed with emotion as more and more people began lining up at her booth, drawn in by Tomoya's efforts. Thanks to his determination, her books sold out completely. Iori, observing Tomoya's dedication to Izumi's success, noted with interest that Tomoya was already this motivated, even though he himself planned to expand their operations next year. As the final book sold, Izumi burst into tears, deeply moved. She thanked everyone as applause erupted around her booth. With that, the second day of Comic Market came to an end. Tomoya stepped outside and spotted Arieri, who was in disguise. He had suspected that it was her earlier when she bought a book from Izumi's circle. Tomoya told her not to be embarrassed just because she secretly visited Izumi's booth or because she hadn't played LeRhap for years. He added that Izumi didn't hold any ill feelings towards her. Arieri refused to say why she was hiding, but Tomoya didn't buy it. He couldn't believe she was genuinely angry about it. Arieri asked about Izumi's book, and Tomoya responded that she should already know, especially since she had read it. He understood because he had seen how hard Izumi worked to sell her books. Tomoya admitted that Izumi was impressive. Despite the tight schedule, she still managed to produce something great. Arieri was upset, however, because Tomoya had never reacted that way to her work. He had never been passionate about seeing her creations, never truly tried to sell her books, and seemed to feel nothing at all. Tomoya then pointed out that Arieri and Izumi were very different genders, popularity, and even different paths in life. Arieri, frustrated, asked if Tomoya thought her book was extraordinary or if it was better than Izumi's. She wanted to know if Tomoya would do anything to help sell her book. But Tomoya simply replied that Arieri's books could sell on their own, even without his help. Arieri began to cry, saying that Tomoya hadn't given her a direct answer, that he hadn't told her anything for sure. In tears, Arieri ran off and her hat fell in front of Tomoya. Megumi, watching from the top of the stairs, saw the whole scene unfold. Tomoya remembered a moment from his elementary school days when Arieri had cried because of him. Now he was faced with the same situation. Arieri was crying and said that his response didn't really answer anything. He had been avoiding giving her a definite answer. Eriri, still in tears, ran off and her hat fell in front of Tomoya. Later that night, suddenly Utaha was in his bed saying good morning to him, which of course shocked Tomoya. Utaha told him to relax and everything was fine. But Tomoya couldn't just call this fine. He asked her why she was there, but Utaha casually explained it was because she hadn't appeared in the previous episode. Megumi came in, holding drinks. It turned out that Megumi had called Utaha to come over. Utaha then commented that Megumi's usual nonchalant attitude when coming into Tomoya's house was something they should probably talk about too. But Megumi said the real topic here should be why Utaha rushed to come 15 minutes earlier even though she just said Tomoya was in trouble. Utaha then asked what happened to Tomoya. She'd heard about it from Megumi, but she didn't expect things between Tomoya and Eriri to go down like that. She suggested they talk it out and find a solution together. Tomoya replied that this was between him and Eriri, and he didn't want to drag Utaha into it. Utaha told Megumi that what she was witnessing was a perfect example of a typical wimpy protagonist from a gal game. When he's in trouble, he shows his anxiety and starts involving others around him. Utaha said that if Megumi ever became the main heroine, she'd have to be ready for this kind of situation. Megumi called it troublesome, but Tomoya admitted he was anxious. Utaha then shared her version of the story. When Tomoya praised Izumi's book, Eriri had flipped out for no clear reason. She started insulting Izumi, ripping up her book, and then pushed Izumi into a puddle, laughing with others. Tomoya felt like part of the story was eerily familiar to how a certain writer might react, and the beginning of Utaha's version was pretty accurate. Utaha said it was childish behavior, and Tomoya agreed with her. He didn't think Eriri was acting like the renowned doujinshi artist she usually was. But then Utaha clarified that she wasn't talking about Eriri's immaturity, but Tomoya's. She asked, shouldn't you have kept quiet about praising someone else's book in front of Eriri? Whatever you say to her will just make her upset. Wouldn't it have been better to keep your true thoughts to yourself? Tomoya couldn't do that. He couldn't just pretend something wasn't good when it actually was. He said it would be easier to stop being an otaku than to lie and say Izumi's doujinshi or Utaha's novel was bad. But Utaha pointed out that Tomoya's words had left a deep wound in Eriri's heart. Tomoya didn't believe it, but Utaha insisted that his words could make her feel like everything had been taken away from her. She even suggested that after this, Eriri might not be able to draw again. Tomoya was skeptical, but Utaha said that Eriri would probably feel like she'd lost her pride as a creator and her position as Tomoya's childhood friend. Izumi was very close to Tomoya and seemed like someone he'd known for a long time, even though they had only recently met. It was just like the situation where a protagonist wants to confess his feelings but fails to win over his crush. This made Utaha frustrated. A heroine who saves the day should show up later, not earlier. Utaha told Tomoya that in order for their group to get through this, he needed to fight for the love of his childhood friend. Tomoya said that it should have been a touching moment, but Utaha ruined it by calling him a wimpy protagonist. Utaha added that vague memories, beautiful moments, and childhood promises should be used to win over Eriri. Tomoya then asked if Eriri would even be affected by that. Megumi was confident it would work, and she added that Tomoya should aim to be the heroine, not the protagonist, just like in light novels. Today was the third day of Comic Market, and Eriri had locked herself in her room. Her parents were leaving to attend the summer comic market as today marked the start of the Holy Battle, the day for men to go into the fray. Eriri simply told them to have fun. Her mother reminded her about the family party that evening. Eriri replied that she wouldn't embarrass her parents. Meanwhile, Utaha was still lying on Tomoya's bed, sniffing his blanket. Tomoya was getting ready to head to Comic Market Summer Isa 276, Egoistic Lily. Megumi asked if Eriri would be coming too. Tomoya wasn't sure if Eriri would show up, but he still had to go. Megumi cheered him on, and Tomoya thanked her. Megumi was confused, feeling like she hadn't done anything, and that it was Utaha who had helped him through the night. But Tomoya still wanted to thank her. Megumi suggested that Tomoya prepare a name for their circle. Tomoya said his goodbyes. Lori had been quietly watching Tomoya, but when he approached, she pretended not to notice. Tomoya walked over and called her out. Lori greeted him, and Tomoya said he had noticed her watching him since he arrived. He added that he wouldn't back down from Eriri. Tomoya told her that he didn't want Lori to give up, but that he needed her help. Lori asked what he needed help with. Tomoya explained that he needed help bringing Eriri back into their circle. It turned out he wanted Lori's assistance in finding an outfit similar to the one the servant wore in Little Love Rhapsody. Eriri was getting ready for her family's party that night. She looked outside and saw the fireworks, which reminded her of scenes from a gal game where the servant character had conquered her. Suddenly, Tomoya appeared, dressed up like the servant. Eriri was shocked and asked what he was doing there. Tomoya asked if he could take her out for a bit, inviting her to the festival. He kept pleading, and Eriri asked if he wasn't embarrassed. Tomoya admitted that he was really embarrassed and he might die from it, but right now, he didn't want to die. He didn't want to die until he resolved things between them. This was actually Utaha's idea because her family was hosting a party with fireworks that evening. Tomoya saw this as the perfect opportunity to make up with Eriri. Utaha suggested that he take inspiration from the fireworks scene in Little Love Rhapsody. The plan was designed to trigger past memories and nostalgia, hoping it would convince Eriri to make up with him. Utaha was confident it would work, thinking that deep down, Eriri was a girl and being a bookish type, she was waiting for her otaku prince. Utaha also remarked that it was too romantic for a pornographic doujin. Megumi thought Eriri was romantic, considering she was into porn doujinshi. Thanks to the plan they'd come up with the night before, Eriri agreed to go out with Tomoya. They headed to their old high school. Eriri noticed that it seemed like the school had built a new building after they graduated. Tomoya explained that the building had been constructed before last year. Eriri asked why Tomoya was trying to make up with her. She also mentioned that Little Love Rhapsody was the game that had changed him. Tomoya admitted that he didn't know anything about Otome games before, but once he tried one, he got hooked. Eriri said that after that, Tomoya made other girls addicted to games too, and wasn't that a form of betrayal? She was upset and told him that now that he had found a good book, the person who created it was Tomoya's childhood friend and his first student. Eriri said it seemed like Tomoya no longer needed her, and she told him to invite Izumi into their circle instead, asking Tomoya to leave her alone. Tomoya apologized to Utaha and Megumi, saying that what he was about to do might not go according to the plan they had discussed the night before. Suddenly, he said there was something he had never been able to confess to Eriri, but Eriri cut him off, saying that it was too late to apologize now. Tomoya said that he had been annoyed with Eriri from the very beginning. He also mentioned that he couldn't make up with her. How could he forget what she had done to him? Eriri asked what Tomoya meant by that and why she was the one being blamed. Tomoya explained that Eriri was the one who changed him. 8 years ago, both Eriri and Tomoya became otaku, but their friends teased them, causing Tomoya to get into a fight. After that, they stopped being friends because Eriri was too embarrassed. Eriri was the one who started it all, pretending to stop being an otaku and then finding new friends while ignoring him. Eriri asked if Tomoya was still holding a grudge over something so trivial. Tomoya got angry, asking how she could think it was something trivial. Eriri explained that she did it because she couldn't do anything about it. Tomoya snapped, asking if finding new friends was that important to her. Was it more important than talking about anime with him? He also said that Eriri had once been so valuable to him that he was willing to be hated by all the other guys just to protect their time together. She was the only one he had. Tomoya admitted that it took years for him to be able to speak normally with others, but even so, he would never forget the cruel way Eriri had treated him. However, Eriri responded by saying that it was Tomoya's own fault for carrying that burden. Tomoya got even more frustrated and shouted for Eriri to apologize to him. But Eriri refused. She then said that Tomoya had no idea how many tears she shed because of the breakup, how she couldn't talk to him and had to ignore him. All of that made her feel lonely, frustrated, and in pain. She confessed that she had suffered more than Tomoya, always feeling like there was a boomerang in her heart every year. That's why she had no reason to apologize. Neither Tomoya nor Eriri were willing to apologize first, and they kept arguing. Eriri demanded that Tomoya apologize for choosing Izumi's book over hers, for gaining fame, and for becoming more skilled. Since Eriri had known Tomoya, all of that was far ahead of her, and she couldn't understand why Tomoya hadn't chosen her. Tomoya stood his ground, saying that he would say he liked someone if he truly did, and that he didn't care about their past. He also said that Izumi's book gave him more of a thrill. Eriri asked if Izumi was better than her. Tomoya bluntly told her that Eriri was lagging behind, that she wasn't as good as Izumi. Eriri retorted that she had fought hard, that she had tried her best alone. Tomoya didn't care about her effort or her talent. His opinion was clear. The book Eriri was selling at Comic Market today was terrible, and it didn't compare at all. Eriri admitted that she had been working hard, and outside she wore a mask, but at home she worked tirelessly. She wanted to get back at the people who had separated her from Tomoya. She wanted things to go back to the way they were, and that was why she had come this far. Tomoya did acknowledge that Eriri had made it this far. She was quick, skilled, and consistent. But from now on, he wanted Eriri to become even better. He wanted to see her grow, become more skilled and consistent. Eriri asked how she could do that. She couldn't work any harder. Tomoya told her to figure it out herself because this was her own work. Ariuri called it nonsense, but Tomoya said that if she thought it didn't make sense, then there was no need for her to get any better. He didn't care if she was number one for herself. Ariuri remembered that her books had many fans, but Tomoya had never praised her. It was different when Tomoya had worked hard to sell Izuni's book. Ariuri then declared that she would be number one for Tomoya, and until that time came, she wouldn't apologize. Tomoya simply didn't care anymore. He said that it was up to her. Tomoya was carrying Ariuri and asked if the story about her sprained ankle was a lie, considering she could still walk. Ariuri replied that a knight who carries the princess out of her castle has no right to complain. Tomoya commented that it seemed like they still hadn't made up, and Ariuri agreed, saying they hadn't apologized to each other yet. Today, Ariuri had finished drawing the illustration for their circle's logo, and Tomoya, Utaha, and Megumi were eager to see it. Utaha thought it looked almost good, but Megumi wondered if it was just her or if the girl in the drawing was really not wearing anything. Ariuri admitted that she knew exactly what Megumi was referring to and had taken inspiration from her perfectly. However, Megumi disagreed, saying it wasn't perfect at all. Utaha chimed in, saying the true heroine would strip if asked and would moan if told to do so. Megumi was shocked to hear that, but Tomoya told her to calm down, reminding her that this was a game for everyone, so it probably wouldn't go that far. Ariuri then asked for Tomoya's final touch as the producer. Tomoya filled in the name of their game, Blessine Software. Tomoya then asked if it was a good name. Ariuri said it was good if Tomoya liked it, and Utaha jokingly added that its free translation could be Megumi Soft. Both Ariuri and Megumi were shocked to hear that, and Tomoya found himself on the receiving end of a punch from both of them. Michiru was using the bathroom in Tomoya's house without him knowing. Meanwhile, Tomoya was in an online meeting with his circle, Ariuri, Utaha, and Megumi. Tomoya wanted to change the dialogue for the second meeting event with the main heroine. Utaha thought that the lucky pervert metaphor was a bit cliched and would end up turning it into a harem situation. Tomoya disagreed, saying that harem was fine, but unfortunately, it didn't fit Utaha's writing style. Ariuri said that there was some truth to what Tomoya said. Although she didn't fully understand novels, what they were working on was a gal game, and this wasn't about literature. It was entertainment. If the girl wasn't cute and a little bit sexy, the player wouldn't enjoy the game. And then what would be the point of it? Besides, what was Ariuri even doing in the circle if there were no cute girl moments? Without that, it would be a waste of Ariuri's talents. Utaha asked why Ariuri had become so motivated after the summer comic market. She also asked what had actually happened. Ariuri replied that Utaha had also been motivated before the summer break. Utaha responded by saying that she was a professional novelist and always gave her full dedication to a project. Ariuri teased her, saying that Utaha's book was delayed. Utaha asked who said such a stupid thing and mentioned that sometimes people need to shut their mouths when they leak information. Tomoya stopped their argument by asking if Utaha was willing to revise the initial scene. Utaha replied that whoever leaked it was definitely not Tomoya. Tomoya insisted that they not talk about it anymore as the topic was closed and they should focus on moving forward. Utaha agreed to revise the script, and Tomoya reminded her that the main point was for the heroine to scream cutely. He then called the heroine to demonstrate. Megumi quickly gave an example, but it was far from Tomoya's expectations. Ariuri realized she had forgotten that Megumi was part of the meeting. They wrapped up their conversation, and before they knew it, the night had grown late. Tomoya left his room and planned to take a shower before bed. When he opened the bathroom door, he was shocked to see someone drying off, wearing only their underwear. It was Michiru. She greeted Tomoya, explaining that she had just finished showering and told him he could use the bathroom. Seeing underwear scattered on the bathroom floor, Tomoya screamed. Michiru apologized, saying she should have informed Tomoya before entering. Tomoya told her that she didn't need to apologize but should have screamed and said, "What are you looking at, you pervert?" To Michiru, it didn't matter. She said that she would be staying there for a while, so it was her fault for not greeting Tomoya when she arrived. Tomoya appreciated Michiru's consideration, but he disagreed with everything she said, just like the current weird situation. Michiru commented on Tomoya's room, which was filled with otaku-related stuff, and asked if he still played games. Tomoya asked why Michiru had come to his house. Michiru said Tomoya wouldn't believe her if she told him that her father was very intimidating. However, to Tomoya, what was more intimidating was the way Michiru was dressed and her pose. Tomoya understood that Michiru had probably fought with her father again and ran away from home. Michiru always did that. She asked Tomoya not to exaggerate, saying that they were just cousins and the same age. Tomoya added that not only were they the same age, but they were also born in the same hospital at the same time. Michiru mentioned that they were bound by fate. Tomoya then asked what problem Michiru was facing this time. Michiru had told Tomoya before that she had joined a band when she started high school and all of the band members were girls. Tomoya hadn't expected Michiru to still be sticking with it. Michiru said that she couldn't just quit after less than a year. Tomoya pointed out that Michiru had dropped out of the volleyball, drama, and basketball clubs after only half a year, even though she had made it to the regional rounds in every one of them. He thought that Michiru was really talented, but that she got bored easily. She was completely different from Tomoya, even though they were family. Tomoya was always focused on something, and since he was a kid, he loved anime and games. Tomoya asked if Michiru was still focused on her band. Michiru explained that her band had become the talk of the town after their performance at the festival. A talent scout from a recording studio approached the band members, which is why she asked her dad for a little money. Tomoya could imagine what happened next. Michiru said that her dad had scolded her, saying they never agreed on this topic. Tomoya didn't want to hear more about it, saying that Michiru was someone who never had any real struggles. That was why Michiru wanted to stay with him for a while. Tomoya then asked how her parents reacted to that. Michiru replied that Tomoya's parents allowed her to stay with them until she and her father made up. Tomoya was surprised by how relaxed her parents were, especially since they never really showed up. Tomoya saw this as a problem. First, Michiru's clothes were way too revealing, but Michiru didn't think it was a big deal since no one else was around. Tomoya said that he was there and he was a high school boy. Michiru jokingly replied that Tomoya was the only boy who saw her like this, and she called it a bonus for him. Tomoya silently prayed that God would teach Michiru a lesson about her inappropriate behavior. Michiru stretched her legs over Tomoya's shoulders, asking him to just say it if he had something to say. Her feet continued to tickle Tomoya's neck. Tomoya said he didn't want to turn around and asked Michiru to dress more modestly. Instead, Michiru trapped Tomoya's neck between her thighs because he wouldn't turn to face her. Tomoya screamed, but Michiru kept insisting that he turn around. She kept pulling his head toward her chest and then started tickling him. Tomoya screamed again, begging Michiru to stop. The next day, Tomoya's circle gathered in the AV room to work on their project. Megumi mentioned that Tomoya seemed tired and asked if his neck was sore, making it hard for him to sleep. Tomoya said it wasn't, and he even twisted his neck before going to bed. Just as Megumi was about to ask again, Utaha stopped her. Utaha also told Tomoya not to push himself too hard. She mentioned that Tomoya had passed on his passion to the circle members, but if he got sick, it would all be for nothing. Utaha offered to take over for him that day and handle things. Tomoya refused because Utaha had already written the script and he wanted to finish the rest himself. Utaha was worried about Tomoya's condition, but Tomoya explained that Utaha had already spent so much time working on her novel that it was late to be released, so he didn't want to trouble her further. If he kept pushing himself, he would ruin Utaha's career, and he couldn't bear to do that. Tomoya couldn't hold back his exhaustion and drowsiness any longer. Utaha asked him to repeat what he had just said, but Tomoya couldn't remember it. Utaha even called Megumi over to ask how to record on her phone. Eriri stood up and asked why Utaha was being so cold toward her. Utaha had only been a little indifferent to Eriri, but now she seemed to have completely forgotten that Eriri was there. Eriri and Tomoya were discussing expressions for a scene in their Gald game project when Utaha suddenly called out from the audio room, telling Eriri not to get too close to Tomoya. Eriri told Utaha to cool her head in there and called her a tease demon. Tomoya suggested that the expression in the Gald game scene be made a bit more sorrowful, and Eriri agreed. Megumi suddenly asked about the book on the table. Tomoya explained that it was the script or a collection of code to make the game work. Megumi was surprised, not expecting Tomoya to have to study such a thick book. Tomoya admitted that he was still a beginner. Eriri said she wouldn't mind helping Tomoya with the script. Utaha immediately pointed out that Eriri hadn't finished her illustrations, but still wanted to help Tomoya, saying that no matter how much Eriri added to the workload, it would just burden someone. Not backing down, Eriri retorted, calling Utaha a novel writer so obsessed with the script that she was neglecting her own work and should keep quiet. Tomoya asked them to stop the professional wrestling atmosphere. It seemed that the only remaining issue was the music, and that was indeed the biggest problem. Modern games couldn't do without background music. Gone were the days when people were satisfied with just beeps and boops. Eriri also mentioned that the power of music was crucial to building the climax of the game. Tomoya agreed, saying that with the right music, you can imagine a scene just by hearing the music. Eriri added that if they couldn't find someone to handle the music, then Tomoya wasn't doing a good job as the producer. Tomoya opened his phone and saw a message from Michiru asking when he would be home, offering pizza for their dinner. Tomoya was surprised as Megumi had seen the message. Megumi apologized, saying she didn't mean to peek at the message but assured him she wouldn't tell anyone who it was from or what it said because that would be rude. Tomoya suspected Megumi had seen everything. Ariori came over and immediately grabbed Tomoya's phone, her expression changing to one of suspicion after reading the message. Utaha and Ariori started interrogating Tomoya. Tomoya explained to them that Michiru was just his cousin, and she was currently staying at his house because she had a fight with her family and ran away. Utaha then summarized that Tomoya was living with his cousin, who was his age. Ariori couldn't imagine them living in the same house, sharing a roof, and even bathing each other. She joked that they were probably talking about the lucky pervert in real life. Tomoya said it was just a coincidence, except for that one time. Utaha asked what he meant by that one time and suggested that there were still many things Tomoya was hiding. She demanded that Tomoya tell them everything that had happened or hadn't happened yet. Tomoya replied that of course he couldn't talk about things that hadn't happened. Tomoya then explained that he and Michiru were born on the same day at the same family maternity clinic near their house in Nagano. Everyone in his family was born there, and they would sometimes visit. Utaha pointed out that Tomoya and Michiru weren't just childhood friends, but had been friends since birth. Every summer and winter break, Tomoya would visit Nagano with Michiru, as other relatives lived there as well. They would wander around open fields and mountains, spending time together in a secret cave they found. Michiru was the only family member of Tomoya's age. Utaha then asked, so Tomoya and Michiru did it? Bathed together, checked the differences between boys and girls, and with that, Michiru became the typical childhood friend who had power over all Tomoya's childhood friends. She also mentioned a special bond that made other childhood friends seem insignificant in comparison. Tomoya snapped back, saying that Utaha had gone too far with her scenario involving Michiru. Ariori was almost in tears after hearing that. Megumi asked if Ariori was okay. Ariori felt like she was nothing compared to Michiru. It seemed like the explanation had left Ariori feeling drained. Tomoya returned home and found Michiru asleep on his bed. He immediately woke her up. Michiru stirred and asked why Tomoya had taken so long to come back. Tomoya explained that he had a meeting for the circle today. As Tomoya looked around his room, he noticed it was a mess because Michiru hadn't cleaned up after eating. Michiru, however, proudly showed off her new electric guitar, saying she had come over yesterday to drop off some of her stuff. Just as Tomoya was about to ask how long she had been playing it, he was shocked to see that Michiru's things were all over his room, filling the shelves. Tomoya asked what all of this meant. Michiru casually replied that her stuff didn't fit and was creating a mess, so she was organizing things. Tomoya then asked where his important belongings were. Michiru nonchalantly said she threw them in the trash near the living room, so they could be picked up with the weekly garbage. Tomoya rushed to grab his things from the trash, apologizing to his heroine. Michiru was surprised that Tomoya considered those things so valuable. Tomoya then told Michiru that it might be a good idea for her to go back to her own house. Michiru begged him not to be so heartless because they were close friends. Tomoya retorted, asking if a close friend would throw their friend's precious items in the trash. Michiru countered by saying even married couples sometimes throw away their husband's collections. Tomoya shot back, saying who could stand a marriage like that. Michiru replied that this was a perfect opportunity for Tomoya to step away from his unclear otaku lifestyle. She even offered to introduce him to some girls, saying that since her school was an all-girls school, Tomoya could choose anyone he liked. Tomoya told Michiru not to mess with him as girls who weren't into otaku culture wouldn't want to date him in real life. Michiru felt bad for him, saying that Tomoya could be popular with girls if he just acted normal. Tomoya figured Michiru was saying something positive because they were family, but she also mentioned that her school had high standards. Just by saying he was from Toryabasaki High School, the girls at her school would probably be interested. Michiru offered to set up a mixed-gender date soon. Tomoya said he wouldn't fall for that, and it wouldn't be enough to pull them out of the otaku world. He added that it was more fun hanging out with girls, but Michiru quickly pointed out that she was in the same situation, having no boyfriend herself. Michiru explained that she was focusing on her band right now, so romance was on the back burner for her. Tomoya agreed, saying he had big dreams too, and until he achieved them, he couldn't leave his otaku lifestyle behind. Michiru asked what kind of dream he had. Tomoya explained that his dream was to bring together the best team to create the Gal game he had always wanted. Michiru responded by saying she had heard that the future of Gal games was pretty bleak. Tomoya refused to believe that. Michiru advised him not to treat it like a job and to think seriously about his future, since it wouldn't be easy to make a living from a hobby alone. She also asked if Tomoya's mother hadn't said anything to him, especially since he only had a year left to decide his future. Did he really want to be someone who wasn't responsible? Tomoya got upset and told her that someone who had run away from home didn't have the right to lecture him. He finished tidying up his room and Michiru told him to take a shower. Tomoya warned her that she could play the guitar but not if she plugged it into the amp, as it could disturb the neighbors. Tomoya was fed up and even considered calling Michiru's dad to come pick her up. Michiru ignored his warning and plugged her guitar into the amp, starting to play. Tomoya grew frustrated hearing the sound and he stormed out of the bathroom to yell at her. As he muttered in annoyance at the sound of the guitar, he suddenly realized that the music actually felt like it would work as a soundtrack for a scene in his Gal game project. Without realizing it, Tomoya had already walked over to Michiru. She apologized to him and Tomoya offered her the chance to join him in creating the greatest Gal game. Michiru was taken aback, but her surprise grew even more when Tomoya's towel accidentally slipped off his body. Today, Tomoya invited Utaha and Eriri to his house to introduce them to Michiru. Tomoya introduced Eriri as the one in charge of illustrations and Utaha as the one handling the script. When Eriri saw Michiru's outfit, she couldn't believe there was a girl dressed so revealingly in front of a guy. Utaha then asked Tomoya to explain his real intentions behind introducing Michiru to them. Tomoya explained that he had asked Michiru to handle the music for the game they were working on. Eriri, however, assumed that Tomoya had some sort of personal interest in Michiru, which was why he was insisting that they work with her. Utaha, on the other hand, questioned if Tomoya wasn't being a bit reckless by suddenly asking Michiru to handle the background music for the video game. Tomoya said his decision wasn't made lightly and he was confident that when Utaha heard the music, she'd definitely be interested. Suddenly, Michiru grabbed Tomoya's neck and told him not to make decisions for her because she hadn't even agreed to his offer yet. Eriri saw how close they were and realized that they had been childhood friends. Just then, Megumi came in with drinks and snacks, but she was shocked to see Eriri's expression. Utaha even guessed that Eriri must feel useless now, and called her a fake, cheap imitation of a childhood friend. Utaha's words hit hard, making Eriri feel really down. Megumi tried to defend her, saying Utaha shouldn't be putting Eriri down when she was already in a bad place. Eriri felt helpless and defeated by the situation. Meanwhile, Tomoya begged Michiru to write some songs for their circle, including some idea programming and background music, and while working on it, she could collaborate with her band on the theme song. Utaha criticized Tomoya for the way he asked people for help, saying he was being rude. Michiru replied that she wasn't interested in Tomoya's offer. Tomoya then pointed out that Michiru had the talent to make great songs and he just wanted to make use of that talent. But Michiru responded that that's exactly why she joined a band, to express herself there. Tomoya was sure that Michiru was the only one who could handle the game's background music. Utaha asked him not to push it, saying that forcing someone who wasn't interested would only make things awkward for both sides. But Tomoya insisted that he didn't want anyone else, just Michiru. Just like how Utaha was the only one who could write the script and Eriri the only one who could handle the illustrations, Megumi was irreplaceable too. Michiru made it clear that she wasn't interested in anything related to the otaku world and told Tomoya to get out of that world and face reality. Tomoya was taken aback hearing the word reality from someone like Michiru, who had never really struggled. Utaha started to feel offended. She asked, what was wrong with being an otaku? Did Michiru think that she and Tomoya, who were both otaku, were bothering her? Michiru even went as far as calling Tomoya by his nickname Rinri-kun, which Utaha always used, saying it smelled like the stench of otaku. Utaha started getting frustrated but remained calm. She asked Michiru if she thought being an otaku was beneath her, just like a servant vomiting up otaku content every day. Did Michiru think otaku were a useless race in society, only burdening others? Michiru said that it didn't have to be like that, and she even asked if people like that actually exist. Utaha responded, telling Michiru not to misunderstand. She wanted to thank her for not looking down on otaku. There are people who dedicate themselves to anime, games, or light novels, the creators who work hard to entertain everyone, and the consumers who play a role in the otaku economy. These consumers enthusiastically support and buy the works that are marketed by these creators. These people sacrifice everything to achieve something. So Michiru, does she have the right to belittle something so noble? Tomoya was amazed by Utaha's explanation in defense of otaku. Utaha also pointed out that, as human beings, there is no difference between otaku and regular people. There's no barrier between creators and consumers. There are also fans who cheer on others but disappear when things get tough. She was frustrated with otaku who are weak like that, saying they should just disappear. Utaha then strangled Tomoya's neck. Michiru said it wasn't about who was good or bad, but rather about cultural differences. She could never get along with Otaku. Tomoya asked if that meant Michiru didn't get along with him. Michiru responded that for her, Tomoya wasn't an otaku, he was Tomo. Ever since they were kids, Michiru always excelled at everything, and she often treated Tomoya like a servant. But whenever things got tough, Tomoya would always become the cool, dependable guy. Tomoya thought that bringing up the past was pointless. Eriri, however, was interested in hearing more about their past. Michiru said they once climbed the mountain behind her grandfather's house. She got so excited and ran too fast, twisting her ankle and being unable to walk. The place was really scary too. The forest was dark, and the sound of crows could be heard everywhere, which made her feel terrified. Tomoya came to find her, his hands, feet, and face scratched up from looking for her everywhere. Tomoya said he was also lost at the time, and by chance they ended up finding each other. After that, he carried Michiru down the mountain. As Michiru remembered this, she got irritated and immediately choked Tomoya, saying that it was the first and last time she would ever cry. Eriri suddenly joined in, attacking Tomoya, asking how old they were at that time and who was older between the two of them. Tomoya replied that Michiru and Eriri had already moved on to a different topic. Wataha and Megumi could only watch helplessly at the behavior of their friends. Michiru had just finished showering and reminded Tomoya to do the same. She asked what Tomoya was doing. It turned out that Tomoya was looking for something. When he turned around, he was shocked by the sexy sight in front of him. Michiru was wearing Tomoya's shirt. Tomoya asked why Michiru was wearing something even more revealing than usual. Michiru explained that all of her clothes were in the laundry. She then began playing her guitar, and Tomoya commented that he really wanted Michiru. Michiru asked if Tomoya wanted to be the first for her. She wasn't saying she wasn't interested, but she felt that being with Tomoya wouldn't be a problem. Living under the same roof with someone like him didn't seem to bother her. Michiru started unbuttoning her shirt, but Tomoya quickly apologized, saying he should have explained things more clearly. What he really wanted was her music. Michiru said that the misunderstanding wasn't her fault and went back to playing her guitar. Tomoya asked again if Michiru was sure she didn't want to help, saying that he wouldn't mind if she prioritized her band over his request. Michiru pointed out that Tomoya hadn't given up yet. Of course, Tomoya wasn't giving up because this was for his dream and for his friends who were helping him achieve that dream. Michiru also said that her band was her dream too, and she had valuable friends, but because of the band, they're now on the verge of breaking up. She apologized, saying that she probably didn't have the time to help Tomoya. Tomoya then asked if Michiru's father still hadn't approved of her band. She explained that they would agree if they met the conditions her father set, but those conditions were really tough. Tomoya asked what the conditions were and offered to help. Michiru's father had said that the band needed to find a real manager, as he was worried about them performing at live houses. Tomoya understood the concern since many rock bands get involved with drugs and casual sex. Michiru remarked that Tomoya had a negative view of rock music, but would get upset when people looked down on otaku. To her, that was hypocritical. Tomoya seemed to understand the situation, so he offered to become Michiru's band manager. He would find out what he could do and even reach out to his contacts in the entertainment industry. In return, Michiru would have to help him when he sorted out her issues. Michiru said that their band manager wouldn't have time to handle a game project. Tomoya said it was impossible for him to fully manage the band. Michiru replied that the band wouldn't accept a man they didn't know. Tomoya, however, told her not to drag him into her band problems since he was busy with his own circle. Michiru suggested that Tomoya should just accept her request and quit working on the game. But Tomoya couldn't accept that because he had his own dream and his friends to consider. Michiru argued that Tomoya's friends weren't really interested in making the game. She had only drawn that conclusion from their conversation earlier. To her, Tomoya's circle was forced, and the only one truly interested in making the game was Tomoya himself. The girls in his circle had different reasons for joining, but Michiru didn't explain what those reasons were. Instead, she teased Tomoya, calling him a naughty dog and tapping his forehead. She explained that what made her band different from Tomoya's circle was that every member of her band was serious about reaching the same dream, which was why she was asking Tomoya for help in realizing hers. The next day after class, Tomoya noticed Megumi wasn't at her desk. Suddenly, Yoshihiko invited him to hang out in Akihabara that weekend. Tomoya wasn't really interested but asked if Yoshihiko had seen Megumi. Yoshihiko said that Megumi had left right after the bell rang. He then asked why Tomoya and Megumi had been so close lately, especially since Megumi was a 3D girl. Tomoya replied that while he liked 2D girls, he never said he hated 3D girls. Yoshihiko asked if Tomoya and Megumi were dating, adding that Megumi was so sweet and wondered if someone like Tomoya could actually date her. Tomoya realized that Megumi was starting to catch the interest of other guys, which meant she was showing signs of growth as a heroine. Yoshihiko teased Tomoya, saying he'd eventually realize how wasteful it was for a girl like Megumi to date someone like him. In his room, Tomoya noticed that there was only 1 week left for the timeline of his game project. He realized that now wasn't the time to be down, at least there had to be some progress in his part of the work. Megumi was at Ariri's house and she had even fallen asleep. Ariri woke her up and brought her a drink. Megumi apologized, saying she had wanted to learn but ended up falling asleep instead. Ariri understood because Megumi wasn't used to staying up late. Megumi mentioned that Mutaha had replied to her message, and it turned out that Mutaha was still awake at 3 a.m. Megumi wanted to change the background of her illustration to a sunset and asked Ariri how to do it. Ariri explained how to change the background. While still working on her own illustration, Ariri asked Megumi why she was doing this. Megumi said that her schedule was getting busier, but that wasn't what Ariri meant. Ariri clarified her question, asking why it had to be Megumi doing this project. Megumi was still unsure and didn't know the reason herself. She then asked Ariri about the expression that would suit the heroine in a particular scene. It turned out the scene was one where the protagonist was about to leave for another heroine. Megumi said the expression should be a strong one, since the character is a girl. Megumi and Ariri ended up falling asleep at the desk. The next morning, Megumi's phone rang, waking her up. It was Tomoya calling, and he apologized for calling so early, asking if she was still sleepy. Megumi said she wasn't used to staying up late. She then asked if Tomoya was still in bed. Tomoya was surprised that Megumi knew, but Megumi said it was just a coincidence. Megumi then asked if there had been any progress with the script. Tomoya replied that nothing had come to mind yet. He then asked if Megumi was upset or annoyed with him. Megumi said that Tomoya could be like that sometimes, but she was sure he would try to finish everything in the last minute. Tomoya wondered if Megumi really knew his habits or if she just trusted him and he himself didn't even know the answer. Tomoya then asked if it was just him who was obsessed with the game or if everyone was really serious about making it, or if they were just doing it because they felt obligated. He also asked if their circle felt forced. Megumi didn't immediately answer Tomoya's question. Instead, she asked if he was hungry. They both met at a cafe where Megumi showed Tomoya one of the scenes they were working on for the project. She had studied it from Tomoya's script book. Tomoya asked why Megumi was doing this when he never asked her to help him. Megumi felt happy that she had studied it. She knew Tomoya was stuck, so she decided to help out a little. Tomoya told her that she didn't have to force herself to help if she wasn't asked. However, Megumi didn't feel forced, nor did she feel obligated. She genuinely wanted to make this game. While she didn't have the skills to develop a game, she couldn't draw like Ariri, write stories like Mutaha, or have the strength or courage like Tomoya. She still wanted to help her friends, even if just a little. She had also received help from Ariri and Mutaha from this scene, and it was clear they weren't doing it out of obligation. While showing Tomoya a scene from the game project, Megumi said that the scene was about him fighting to become the heroine whose happiness would make others envious. Tomoya promised he would do that. Megumi then showed him another piece of dialogue from the game, which asked if Tomoya had ever experienced a thrilling love story, like when a relative visited them in the countryside and he twisted his ankle and his cousin carried him home while crying. When Megumi mentioned being close with her cousin, she admitted that she had actually experienced something similar. The main point was that Megumi understood the feeling of being attracted to a cousin since childhood and meeting and living together. Tomoya immediately apologized after hearing that dialogue. Megumi said she had forgotten to include some random dialogue in the scene during a practice, but Tomoya didn't believe her. He knew that the dialogue was intentionally shown to him. Tomoya then played the music that Michiru had recorded secretly the day before for Megumi. She liked it, and Tomoya explained that the music felt like it had an air of longing and nostalgia, almost like it belonged to an old-school game or anime, but in a really good way. Megumi admitted that for some reason the music was pleasant to listen to. She then asked if Michiru had no interest in the world of otaku. Tomoya is now the manager of Michiru's band. He mentions that today, 6 bands are performing and their band will be the first to perform. Their band is called Icy Tail. The members of Icy Tail include Himiko Tokino, who plays guitar, Mizuhara Ichika, who plays bass, Morioka Ranko, who plays drums, and Michiru, who is both the vocalist and plays guitar. Upon hearing that they will be performing first, Tokino feels disappointed because they won't have time to warm up beforehand. Tomoya explains that this is Icy Tail's debut performance, so they're not yet well known, don't have a career history, and don't have fans. That's why they aren't listed on the tickets, advertisements, or websites. According to Ichika, this means no one is specifically coming to see them. That's why Tomoya wants to participate and help Icy Tail get their start. He asks the band members to believe in each other's abilities to reach the peak of their careers. Tomoya then asks if anyone still feels nervous. If so, it's not too late to back out. Michiru, however, is confident that they will definitely be recognized, build a career history, and gain many fans today. Tomoya encourages them before they perform, and before they change costumes, they all do a fist bump to boost their confidence. Tomoya reminds them that he has done everything he can for them, and once they change into their costumes, there's no going back. Everything is in their hands now, and they need to show the audience what they've got and make a legendary performance. Megumi and Wataha have plans to watch Icy Tail perform at Mogra. Megumi asks where Iriri is. Wataha explains that she teased Iriri earlier, which made her cry. Iriri then said she didn't want to join and went to Kyuremade Cafe instead. Megumi, however, had hoped that Wataha and Iriri wouldn't act so selfishly. Wataha asks who's being selfish, pointing out that it was Megumi who casually decided Tomoya should be the manager of Michiru's band, and she even prioritized the band over their own circle. They even left for today's event without discussing it with anyone else. Megumi responds, saying that honestly, it was Tomoya who made that decision. But Wataha blames Megumi, knowing but not stopping him, even supporting him. Megumi explains that Tomoya has a plan, so they just need to trust him. Wataha comments that her inner voice is telling her that only Megumi understands Tomoya. Megumi doesn't quite understand what Wataha means by that, and Wataha apologizes for speaking carelessly and asks Megumi to forget what she just said. Megumi mutters to herself, wondering if Wataha will cause trouble, but Wataha hears her and assures her not to worry, as it's actually Iriri who will be the troublemaker. Wataha also comments that recently it seems like Iriri and Megumi have gotten very close. She warns Megumi that if she gets too close to Iriri, Wataha will make her life miserable. Megumi and Wataha go to pick up Iriri from Kyuremade Cafe, telling her that the band performance is about to begin, but Iriri still refuses to come. Megumi asks her not to act like a baby, but Iriri insists she won't join. Wataha says it's pointless to force her now, since Iriri still believes she's Tomoya's childhood friend, the one who's known him the longest, the one who suffered the most, and the one who believes in him the strongest. But now, all of that is shattered with Michiru's presence. Iriri doesn't even know how to define her own identity anymore. She's so pitiful, like a soldier who's lost a battle. Megumi realized that Wataha had been teasing Iriri like that, and she didn't want them to fight, so she asked Wataha to trust Tomoya. Wataha then questioned what there was to trust about Tomoya. Iriri agreed with Wataha, thinking that this was really not funny. As they entered, they were greeted by the sight of Michiru, lying on top of Tomoya. Michiru was upset with Tomoya for humiliating her so badly. Seeing this, Wataha and Iriri both asked what there was to trust about Tomoya. Michiru wasn't happy with the costume that Tomoya had prepared for her. Tokino had already predicted that it would end up like this. Ichiko was more focused on the parts of Tomoya and Michiru's bodies that were touching. Tomoya laughed and said that now was the time to reveal the truth behind this band. When Michiru first met the band members, the songs they played, including the ones they played after Michiru joined, were covers of anime songs. Before Michiru joined, they were a band that liked to cover anime songs, which was one of the otaku activities. Tomoya said the song Michiru was playing was a new pop chart topper, but it turned out to be a trap because Michiru wasn't interested in anime songs. Michiru didn't even realize that every song she played was an anime song. Because of this, Michiru herself unknowingly created a melody from an anime song, and without her knowledge, her own mind had been manipulated by the band. Megumi remarked that Tomoya had been listening to it over and over, yet he didn't realize it. Tomoya said that he didn't notice because he only listened to anime music. He called it a clever trick, and Michiru's three friends laughed. Michiru hoped that what Tomoya said was a lie. Tokino had expected it to go like this. Ichika said they hadn't told Michiru because they knew she would get in a bad mood if they talked about anime. Ranko apologized to Michiru, but Michiru felt the apology was too late. Tomoya remarked that not many otaku hung out with Michiru, which made Michiru angry. It was truly an unexpected plot twist, the peak of a chance. Tomoya said that was why Tokino, Ichika, and Ranko had made an agreement with him, and in return, Tomoya became the manager of Icy Tail, the anime cover band. Then they agreed to let Michiru work at Blessing Software, and that was a win-win solution for everyone. But Michiru didn't feel it was a win for her. Tomoya then said that if she agreed, Michiru could quit, take off her costume, and leave right now, but she had to understand that her friends, the ones who meant a lot to her, were waiting for her. Tokino apologized for keeping it a secret from her all this time. Ichika also said they couldn't keep lying to themselves anymore because they really wanted to play anime songs. Tokino, Ichika, and Ranko even begged Michiru to stay in the band. Ariuri felt forced by this unfair solution, unlike Utaha, who was more focused on how cool the position of Michiru and Tomoya was. Michiru said she wasn't an otaku, but Tomoya told her she didn't need to be one, she just needed to sing for them. Michiru wasn't sure if someone like her could sing in front of an otaku audience. Tomoya reassured her, saying that one day Michiru would grow into an otaku. Michiru admitted that anime songs were really good, so she still had a sense of appreciation for them. That was why Tomoya believed the audience would like her and her songs would resonate with the otaku. Tomoya then invited Michiru to be happy with them. His words, of course, sounded ambiguous and everyone who heard it trembled. Isitale was ready to perform in front of the audience. At first, Michiru felt a bit nervous, but she tried to stay confident and Isitale successfully performed their first song. The audience loved it. The cheers from the crowd made Michiru even more confident. Isitale went on to perform their second song, which was written by Michiru herself, titled Cherish You. Michiru thanked the audience and they really loved her song. Tomoya was proud of Isitale's performance and he gave them a fist bump from afar. Michiru returned the gesture, shouting Aishiteru, which means I love you. After that, Ariuri and Utaha kicked Tomoya. Tomoya explained that the Aishiteru she said was actually the name of the band Isitale pronounced in Japanese. Tomoya asked Michiru how her first concert went. Michiru felt excited. She never expected the audience to like her performance so much, and it was truly amazing. Tomoya pointed out that these fans came to watch the concert regardless of the genre, and they were all incredible, but also a little disgusting. Michiru didn't appreciate Tomoya calling them disgusting, especially since they were her fans. Tomoya had managed to make Michiru's dream come true, something Michiru never even imagined. He then said it was Michiru's turn to make his dream come true. Tomoya wanted Michiru to write a song for his game's music, and she couldn't refuse. Today, Tomoya had heard the cheers of the otaku, and from now on, Michiru's music would make them shed tears. Tomoya planned to combine Utaha's scenario, Ariuri's illustrations, and Michiru's music to create a miracle. Michiru called Tomoya so optimistic. He responded asking if Michiru thought someone was foolish just because they cried over a game. Michiru admitted that after everything that happened today, she might start believing Tomoya a little, which meant that their agreement was official. Michiru's friends were happy to hear that, but Utaha and Ariuri were clearly annoyed. Michiru asked Tomoya to finalize their agreement. She got closer to him, which made Tomoya think some inappropriate thoughts, but instead of that, Michiru punched him and said she would never forgive him. Megumi was grateful that Michiru had joined their circle, but Ariuri didn't really care about that. Megumi said she couldn't wait for Michiru to write a great song for the dating sim game. Ariuri replied that even without the music, the scenario and illustrations could make people cry. Megumi didn't respond to Ariuri's comment, which made Ariuri ask if she had said something strange. Megumi just said that there were two things she found enjoyable. Ariuri didn't understand what Megumi meant. Megumi explained that the first thing was she knew Ariuri really respected Utaha, but Ariuri said that talent and personality were two different things. The second thing Megumi liked was that Ariuri had started to take the game seriously. For Ariuri, it seemed that Megumi was just as serious about the game as she was. Megumi couldn't wait for the upcoming winter comic market and was curious to see how the game would turn out. Megumi walked ahead of Ariuri and suddenly, Ariuri called her by her first name instead of her last name. Megumi was surprised, but Ariuri quickly apologized, saying she had slipped up, though she eventually admitted it was intentional. Ariuri felt it was strange that even though they were fellow otaku working overtime to make the game, they were still so formal with each other. She asked Megumi if she thought the same. Megumi remembered what Utaha had said about getting too close to Ariuri, that it would turn her friend's life into misery. Seeing Megumi remain silent, Ariuri started to step back, but then Megumi surprisingly seemed open to getting closer to her. Utaha had successfully completed the dialogue for the dating sim game. The game starts with Seiji returning to this world, this time again, but will he be able to change everything? Will he be able to save everyone? Suddenly, the wind blew from the top of the hill and Seiji closed his eyes, staring into the direction of the wind. Then, as if by magic, a hat was blown by the wind and landed right in front of him. His body suddenly moved on its own, and before he realized it, he was running up the hill. In an instant, Meguri was running down the hill. Seiji asked Meguri to stop running because they were on a hill. Less than 3 seconds later, halfway down the hill, they embraced each other. They met again after several hours after decades had passed. Meguri then asked whether she should call him Seiji or Onisama, older brother. Seiji replied that it was up to her, whether Meguri or Ruri. Finally, they had finished the initial part of their game project. Eriri didn't see any bugs and Utaha didn't notice any typos or mistakes in the writing. Their dating sim game was truly a perfect success. They all smiled with satisfaction after completing the project. Tomoya thanked everyone and said that their game route was now finished. Utaha said that she needed to start writing the next route. Eriri also mentioned there were still 30 more keyframes, 12 backgrounds, and some static poses to do. Utaha, feeling exhausted, chose to take a short nap. Meanwhile, Eriri continued working and cheered everyone on. Michiru even promised to sing to keep their spirits up. Whether they liked it or not, the winter comic market was only 2 months away. Otaku and non-otaku alike mocked each other, frustrated, laughed together, disagreed, worked side by side, argued, and did so many other things. This was the story of Tomoya and his friends' journey in making their dreams come true, overcoming many obstacles along the way. Tomoya was the spokesperson for the school's Doujin Game Circle. He was a second-year high school student and an otaku. In mid-October, he and the other members of the circle went on a trip to a location relevant to the game they were working on. During the journey, Utaha commented on the prologue of the story Tomoya had written. She said that starting with a long monologue from the protagonist was pointless. If Tomoya wrote such a boring opening, players would just fall asleep. Utaha let Tomoya do as he pleased since he wanted to write the script, but she insisted he needed to learn the basics first. Tomoya argued that it was just a prologue and that players wouldn't have any information yet, so he needed to explain things in detail. Utaha countered by suggesting he weave the exposition into the dialogue between characters instead. Tomoya was amazed by Utaha's skill, acknowledging that she was the one responsible for the scriptwriting at Blessing Software, as well as being the author of light novels under the pen name Kasumi Yutako. Eriri then asked what Tomoya and Utaha were whispering about, while Michiru commented that the two seemed to be flirting while others were trying to sleep. Tomoya went on to introduce the illustrator of their circle and also of his childhood friend, Eriri. Then there was their music director and vocalist of a band that performed anime songs, as well as Tomoya's cousin, Michiru. After a long train ride, they finally arrived at a beautiful place, a mountain far from the city. Eriri asked Megumi to be her model because she wanted to sketch there. Michiru questioned why Eriri was going through so much trouble drawing when she could just take a photo instead. Eriri explained that sketching the scenery would make them feel as if they were truly present in the moment, which was very different from painting or copying a photograph. Michiru didn't fully understand but commented that Eriri was such a perfectionist. Utaha dismissed Eriri's perfectionism as useless and decided to just take a photo of the scenery instead. This, of course, led to another argument between Eriri and Utaha. Tomoya then noted that the names and backgrounds of the characters had already been naturally introduced through their conversations, which was the storytelling method Utaha had talked about earlier. Eriri then instructed Megumi to express emotion for her drawing. She asked Megumi to act as if she were stopping the protagonist from heading into the final battle, but was unable to stop him because he was fighting for world peace. It had to be a mix of love and duty, with an expression of resignation, a slight sad smile, or perhaps tears welling up in her eyes. Megumi, however, was completely baffled. She told Eriri that she couldn't possibly give such a complicated direction to a beginner model. Eriri was frustrated. Megumi was supposed to be the heroine, yet she couldn't even give an expression of someone who had just been left by a lover, struggling to stay strong while drowning in sadness. Megumi responded, saying that the main heroine usually wouldn't end up like that. Eriri didn't deny it, but insisted that Megumi follow her direction. Eriri asked Megumi to imagine having a childhood friend for the past 10 years, someone she had been close with since they were kids. Despite their fights and separations, Megumi had to steal her heart to stay by his side forever. But then suddenly, he was taken away by some wretched woman, flaunting their affection in front of her while belittling her. Even so, she had to support him, forcing herself to smile despite the pain tearing at her heart. After saying all that, Eriri burst into tears. Megumi sighed and said that Eriri really shouldn't be bringing up her own past. Once she was done crying, Eriri looked around for Tomoya. Megumi informed her that Tomoya had gone off with Utaha. Eriri shouted in shock. Tomoya and Utaha were walking through the forest. Tomoya noted that the bushes there didn't seem suitable as a background for their game. He asked Utaha if there was a better location ahead, but Utaha said this place was already perfect. She had just envisioned the scene in her head. She then asked Tomoya to help her, as she was planning out a situation. Tomoya agreed but admitted he had no idea what she wanted him to do. Suddenly, Utaha leaned in close to Tomoya and said that before the final battle, the heroine would be unable to hold back her feelings for the protagonist. She would take him into the bushes and try to unleash her passion. Tomoya immediately dismissed it as something straight out of a generic game. Utaha countered that it all depended on how they presented it, maybe teasing the audience with soft gas or transitioning suddenly to a sunrise with birds chirping. Tomoya joked that if anyone actually spent the night here, they might not make it out alive. Utaha insisted that if Tomoya wanted to finish the game, he had to help her with this scenario. Tomoya argued that it was unfair to dump the responsibility onto him. Utaha continued acting out the scene, pressing herself against him as she described how the heroine would gently embrace the protagonist, who would be unable to resist her and freeze in place. As she kept moving closer, she added that the protagonist would then tenderly stroke the heroine's hair. Tomoya, stunned, remained silent, prompting Utaha to ask why he wasn't playing along with the script. Tomoya said it was an impossible request. Utaha sighed and released him, deciding to skip straight to the climax. In this part of the script, the protagonist would hold the heroine's shoulders, look into her eyes, and confess that he had always loved her. Suddenly, they heard Eriri shouting Utaha's name. She was running towards them at full speed but tripped and tumbled down. Utaha rushed over and asked if she was okay. Eriri blamed everything on Utaha. Utaha simply replied that she was only trying to work on their game scenario. While they argued, Michiru took the opportunity to drag Tomoya away from the scene. Eriri then turned her anger toward Tomoya, accusing him of falling for Utaha's feminine wiles. That was when they realized Tomoya was no longer there. Michiru had taken Tomoya to an incredible location, a breathtakingly beautiful lake. She invited him to swim with her. Michiru then suggested they set the game's climax in this very spot. Overflowing with inspiration, she hugged Tomoya tightly, making him uncomfortable. He asked her to let go, but she eagerly ran into the lake, splashing around and saying the water was cold yet refreshing. Tomoya, still annoyed, pointed out that Michiru had kidnapped him without even apologizing. Michiru simply wanted to show him this amazing place as quickly as possible. Tomoya told her she should consider his feelings. He was sure Michiru always did whatever she wanted without thinking. In response, Michiru splashed water at him, saying he needed to experience the lake's refreshing sensation. Tomoya, irritated, told her to stop and reflect on what she had done. But instead of apologizing, Michiru took it as a challenge and splashed even more water at him. Tomoya approached her, demanding that she stop, but Michiru suddenly grabbed him and threw him into the lake, sending them both plunging into the water.